Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Minato and Kushina regrets abandoning Naruto part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Konoha, 6 years after the Kyuubi attack, Naruto POV. It had been 6 years since the Kyuubi attacked Konoha. The third Hokage had sacrificed his life to seal the Kyuubi into his twin sister, Shio Uzumaki. Many would believe that his life would be better with a life without being an orphan, without the Kyuubi, and without the hatred of the village. They would think wrong. Naruto Uzumaki had spent 6 years of his life being neglected and slowly being forgotten by his parents. It used to be small things, such as forgetting to call him for dinner, ignoring his suggestions when going out, and never tucking him into bed at night. Eventually, however, the neglect had gotten worse. His parents began to forget him more and eventually even forgot his birthday. The people in the village seemed to forget he was even the son of their Hokage and ignore him like any other faceless orphan child of the village. After his forgotten 5th birthday, he began to truly raise himself. He cooked his own meals at odd hours to not interact with his family, and started to read books on ninja basics. He studied the basics relentlessly to prepare for the academy at age 8. He knew he couldn't count on his parents for training. If he couldn't trust them to remember his birthday, how could he trust them to train him? He knew that they had already started training Shio at age 5. When he asked them to help him train, they simply glanced at him and told him he would be trained at the academy, and Shio needed extra help to control the Kyuubi. It was at that point he lost all faith in his parents, and he started to not even call them that in his head. He eventually started to leave the estate and train on his own. He soon learned he had a knack for chakra control as he mastered the basic leaf sticking exercise on his 4th try. He eventually got so good at the exercise he could stick more than 10 leaves to his body at a time. However, he knew he would need more instruction than just basic scrolls. He soon started sneaking into Minato's library and stole numerous scrolls on the basics. As he completed more of the chakra control exercises, he learned that unlike his mother and sister, he did not have too much chakra. He still had an above-average level for his age, as expected of any Uzumaki, but not enough for it to be unmanageable. He was reading a specific exercise called tree walking. There were no trees large enough in the estate to really learn the exercise, so he exited the gate and went to the surrounding forest of the Uzumaki estate. He packed a backpack full of items that he would need: a change of clothes, some food, some kunai, shuriken, a bedroll, and some jutsu scrolls from Minato's private library. He was planning on sleeping outside tonight and get away from the estate. It's not like they would remember him anyway. He reached his usual training clearing and prepared to get to work. He had stolen some useful jutsu from Minato. He had stolen the instructions for Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Kage Shuriken no Jutsu, water walking, tree walking, Kawamari no Jutsu, Henge no Jutsu, Bushin no Jutsu, and a stolen Suna scroll on how to create chakra strings. He had also managed to find some of Tsunade's training scrolls on medical jutsu. He assumed that it was a gift to Minato that he never used. He knew that some of the jutsu were beyond him at the moment. He barely had enough chakra to create 1 Kagebushin, but he figured out with just 1 Kagebushin he could train twice as fast and increase his reserves at the same time. He already knew what he wants to focus on in his ninja career. Whatever Minato and Kushina were bad at, he would specialize in. He knows that Minato and Kushina are really bad at medical arts, genjutsu, and poisons. He only wished that Tsunade hadn't left the village after she healed Kushina from the extraction of the Kyuubi. Though he was doubtful that Tsunade would want to teach him, most likely she would just focus on Shio like Jiraiya and Kakashi. He quickly got to work on tree climbing. He knows that theoretically if he masters tree climbing he can master any jutsu, or at least that's what it says in the description. After several tries he found that tree climbing was not that hard. He did not know if it was because of the level of difficulty of the exercise, or if he just had good control of his chakra. He trained with tree walking for several hours, slowly being able to walk up the tree without much focus. After his 50th repetition of the exercise he was quite exhausted. He knew it was thanks to his inherited Uzumaki stamina that he had managed to last for so long. As he drank some water he decided to visit the library, a place of solace for him when the neglect gets too much. He wanted to read some medical textbooks to try and get an early start on his medical education. He wanted to at least be able to patch up basic wounds by the time he enters the academy. He enters the library and smiles at the old librarian. The librarian, Yu Haruka, is a retired chunin of the village, with graying brownish hair, large thick glasses. She looked like every other common grandmother. She had been a friend of Naruto since he had started coming here at age 5. She was one of the only villagers who actually pays attention to him. He walked silently to the medical section. Many of the more advanced books were safely stored at the hospital. However, there were many books that explained basic medical practices left in the library for aspiring students. The library also had a wide selection of anatomy, botany, biology, and science textbooks for civilian students. Naruto proved his prodigious intellect as he understood the medical texts. After recovering enough chakra, he had already made a Kagebushin and had it read a book on the human anatomy while he read the basics of medical chakra. The book described medical chakra as purified spiritual energy. This purified spiritual energy enters the dead or dying cells of the target and reactivates them, quickly healing the target. However, one must have great chakra control and mental focus to use these techniques because an overflux of medical chakra could kill the cells instead of healing them. The book mentioned some famous applications of healing chakra, such as Tsunade's legendary strength by separating her chakra into spiritual and physical energy. He decided that one of his goals would be to eventually recreate Tsunade's strength. He looked out the window and sat that it was getting rather late, the library would be closing soon. He released his clone and closed his eyes to absorb the information from his doppelganger. It appeared that the clone discovered all of the pressure points of the body, the 7 critical spots of the body, and what the chakra system looks like in the human body. It was quite fascinating. He returned to his spot in the woods and after eating a light meal of bread and cheese, went to sleep. The next day, 6 a.m. village forest. Naruto woke up to see it was very dark and cloudy today. It was probably going to rain. He quickly packed all of his belongings in his pack and quickly ran back to the estate, hoping to miss the rain. As he was about to open the gate, he noticed something wrong right when he tried to open it. It would not open. Growing slightly desperate, he tugged harder on the gate. It remained firmly closed. He tried to think of why the gate wouldn't open and his eyes widened. Today was October 1st. Minato always redrew the seals on the estate by the end of each month. One of the seals identified who was allowed into the estate by their chakra signature. Minato must have forgotten to input him into the defenses. He knew that Minato would already be in his office, and that Kushina would be making breakfast for Shio soon. He stood there for a few minutes silently as it started to rain. He looked up at the sky and saw it was starting to pour, drenching him. He knew he was finally fully forgotten by the Namake's family. He wondered why this information hurt him as much as it did. He knew this day would occur eventually. Ever since his 5th birthday, he had been preparing for the day his parents abandoned him. He had stocked enough non-perishable food at a cave near the glade he trains in to last him at least 2 years. As he stood there in the rain, his anger and hatred grew for the family. He would not beg or yell at that man to let him back into the house. He didn't care that he had no resources or backing from any family anymore. He decided to get revenge on his former family. He knew that this goal would be nearly impossible. The Namake's Uzumaki family was loved throughout the Land of Fire. Minato was loved by the daimyo, and would never hear a bad word against him. He also knew that when Shio entered the academy no one would say anything bad to her. However, he didn't care. He would gain revenge in any way he could. The only possible method to do so in his eyes was to be better than Shio. If he was better than Shio, he could prove to everyone in the village he didn't deserve to be forgotten. That he was just as important than the princess of Kona. He started to walk back to the forest knowing he had to find shelter from the rain. He knew of a cave near the glade he was in that he can take shelter in. After the rain passes, he could figure out what to do. Hidden cave 7 a.m. As he rested inside the cave, he used some chakra control exercises to dry his clothes and body from the rain. He had rarely entered this cave, never finding much need to. The cave was the perfect hideout. The natural formation of the trees and shrubbery effectively hid the entrance, while a rock formation around the cave hid it from view even further. But now it was his home for the foreseeable future, and he decided to explore it. As he walked down the cave, he noticed that the floor was gradually getting smoother, and the walls more box-shaped as he slowly walked deeper into the cave. Eventually he arrived at a steel door, slightly rusted with age. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. He used the trick he discovered from breaking into Minato's library so often. He formed a small chakra string and inserted it into the lock. He started to pump chakra into the string, and it expanded into the shape of the key. Slowly turning it, he heard a click and the door opened inward. The room inside looked like an abandoned laboratory, filled with jars of animal parts, preserved plants, and many other unknown objects. He looked around a bit more and found a desk next to a distilling station with a journal resting on it. He started to read some of the first pages. January 5th. I recently found a cave that will be perfect for my poison and medical studies. Here I will be able to start my path to power. The snake Sannin, Orochimaru. January 10th. I have begun testing on small animals my snakes have brought to me. Many of my poisons are still too messy. I have begun to experiment with different venoms and plants to create the perfect poison. February 2nd. I have done it. I have made the perfect poison. After several minutes of applying the poison, it remains completely undetectable for several hours before the animals die of a heart attack. I cannot be sure if the result will have the same effects on humans. I do not wish to be discovered by bringing local bandits to this laboratory. Perhaps some of the children of the civilians of the village can assist me in my projects. Naruto nearly dropped the journal in shock. He had found one of Orochimaru's hidden laboratories. He knew who the snake Sannin was through Minato's library. He had read about the monstrosities this man had committed against the citizens of Kona. However, as he stared at the journal, he knew this could be the key in giving him an edge over Shio. He knows that Shio will be getting tutoring from at least 4 Kage-level ninjas. By the time Shio graduates, she will probably be high Chunin level, even more so if she proves to be a prodigy like her father. He knows to be better than her he would need a serious edge. An edge that could be gained from this laboratory. But could he lower himself to accept tutoring, even indirectly, from one of the most monstrous missing nin in the elemental nations? He looked at more of the passages in the journal, all describing horrific experiments and poisons that could kill anyone. He contemplated on how far he would be willing to go for his revenge. He looked around the lab, seeing all of the tools available to him if he accepted this dark path. He started to remember all of the times his family had forgotten him. He remembered when his family went to the QB festival forgetting him at the house. He remembered watching his family eating dinner, all laughing together as a family. He remembered watching from his window as Minato and Kushina began Shio's training, forgetting him entirely. He finally remembered him standing out in the rain, completely forgotten and abandoned. Naruto looked around the lab once more, seeing instructions for high-level poison making, high-level medical techniques, chemistry sets, gas masks, syringes, and then looked to the far wall where 3 practice dummies were kept and imagined the faces of his family on them, never looking at him and treating him like a stranger, and he felt his hatred grow further. He looked at the journal in his hand and accepted the fact that he was going to walk down this dark path. He walked to the door and closed it, locking it from the inside, and when he exited the laboratory, he would be a changed person. Training and the crazy snake lady. Hidden laboratory, Konoha. 5 months after the start of training, Naruto was obsessed. He had learned much in the 5 months he had begun studying in the laboratory. He had learned almost all of the basic poisons from the ingredients he was able to locate from the surrounding forest. He had relentlessly worked on his chakra control with the tree walking and water walking exercises. He now was able to summon 3 shadow clones to train alongside of him. 1 shadow clone would work on chakra control while the other 2 continued their medical and poison studies. He had finished reading Orochimaru's journal. He was absolutely disgusted by some of the experiments conducted by Orochimaru. Apparently he would experiment on humans and catalog their reactions to his poisons. He learned to prevent queasiness after the first chapter. However, he kept telling himself that he needs to continue this path to continue his dream of revenge. After the first few months of studying Orochimaru's poisons, he was almost glad that Orochimaru had finished his experiments before he was forced out of Konoha. His effort is his benefit. His poisons seemed to have more uses than just killing. He seemed to divide his poisons into 3 categories: fatal, non-fatal, and other use. His fatal poisons were among the most numerous, ranging from poisons that would kill you upon injection to poisons that could remain docile for days before killing the target. His non-fatal poisons were very wide-ranged. The effects ranged from sleeping drafts to bottled madness. Think the berserker poison from AC. Some of the poisons even did the reverse of poisons and seemed to heal the drinker. He wondered if those poisons would be better classified as elixirs. The section that really interested him was the other effects. The section seemed to be dedicated to enhancing the body through poisoning oneself. However, some of the poisons had strong side effects. One even turned the body into a mummified husk after the effects wore off. He decided to not try any of these poisons until he had a much stronger body, mind, and much more chakra control. The journal mentioned that if one constantly poisoned oneself with minor venoms, it could help negate poisoning oneself. His indirect sensei wrote that it would help build up the immune system. He soon found, however, that most minor poisons had almost no effect on him. He assumed this was due to being a half Uzumaki. Abusing this genetic trait, he constantly poisoned himself with minor to medium level poisons, gradually increasing his resistance to different venoms. He had also found several books on sealing in the laboratory. He contemplated learning the art a long time, since it was Minato's specialty. However, as he reviewed some of Orochimaru's greatest works, he realized he would need a good foundation in sealing to accomplish them, such as the legendary curse seals that were briefly mentioned in the journal. Before he knew it, 5 months had already gone by in the laboratory. He had mastered most of the basics of being a ninja. His chakra control was high genin level. His medical skills were enough to be able to patch up most minor wounds. He had learned to create many of the basic to medium poisons listed in the several texts that Orochimaru left behind. However, he knows that the basics were not enough and that he needed to learn more advanced techniques to defeat his sister. Namikaze Uzumaki Estate, Konoha. 5 months after Naruto left, Shio POV. Shio had learned much from her 4 tutors. She was already starting the basics of Kenjutsu, chakra control, hand seals, and sealing. Despite all of the positive attention from the villagers and her parents, she was not spoiled. Her Ka-san would murder her if she acted like a spoiled clan heiress. However, she still acted arrogant around other children. She deserved to act arrogant because she was better than them. Her Two-sen had introduced her to a new chakra control exercise yesterday, the tree walking exercise. She was having a lot of difficulty completing it. Her Two-sen always told her that it was because of her large chakra reserves. But she had already gotten halfway up the tree. She bet no one has been able to complete this exercise faster. She knows she will be super strong by the time she is ready for the academy. She would beat down all of the other students and make her way to becoming Hokage. Databeo, Forest of Death, Konoha. 1 year and 5 months after the start of training, Naruto POV. It had been 1 year since Naruto had mastered the basics. He had grown a little and was now age 7.5. He had changed greatly over the year. Due to lack of sleep and from being around so many poisons, his eyes had lost their pupils, I have no idea if this is possible, but so many Naruto characters don't have pupils, so I assume that is the cause. And his hair had gone from a sunny blonde to an almost white color. Due to careful combing, his hair had gradually lost its signature spikiness, and he had grown his hair in 2 long bangs on the side of his face with a short ponytail. He was now wearing a hooded fur-lined coat, black shinobi pants, black medical wrap around his arms, and dark green shinobi sandals. He carried a satchel lined with storage seals to carry all of his supplies. It's a satchel, not a purse. He also wore a gas mask loose around his neck, almost acting as a face mask as it covered half his face. Thanks to injecting himself with so many poisons, his blood was very toxic. He had discovered this when he had accidentally cut himself, and it fell on a rat he was experimenting with. The rat had suddenly started to convulse until it died several minutes later. He had also discovered that due to the toxins in his blood, it was now a pure black color. He had created a new identity in the village. He put himself down as an orphan named Menma. He had also signed up for the academy. He had contemplated just leaving the village, but he had nowhere else to go. IWA would rather kill him than let him join their village. Kyumo would put him into a breeding program. Suna was allied with the Leaf, and he didn't even want to think about Kiri with their civil war going on. Besides, how could he gain his revenge against the Namake's family if he was in a different village? In the present, however, he was searching for rare plants that were required for his latest poison in the Forest of Death. The Forest of Death was named this for a reason. However, due to the toxin in his blood, most predators left him alone because they could smell he was dangerous and inedible. As he continued to walk into a clearing full of nightshade, a beautiful purple plant that looks like lavender, just 10 times more deadly, he jumped back as a kunai flew past him into the ground. He drew a scalpel and injected a little medical chakra into it to allow it to cut easier. As he was preparing for a fight, he heard a female voice laugh mockingly, "Hee hee hee. Does the Ikko Gaki want to play with me? The little Gaki is not supposed to be here." Naruto looked around cautiously, trying to pinpoint the voice, and spoke in his usual monotone voice, "Who are you?" The gate was open when I arrived at this forest, so I assumed it was allowed. It was true. The side gate to the forest was wide open when he was trying to break into the forest. From her hiding spot in the trees, Anko Midarashi's sweat dropped as she had forgotten to lock the gate before she had entered the forest. But she wasn't going to let any Gaki talk back to her. She quickly shoe-shined right behind the Gaki and pointed a kunai at his cheek, going for full creepiness factor 10. She spoke seductively/menacingly in his ear and said, "Well, Gaki, my name is Midarashi Anko, and you better remember it. Now why don't you tell me who you are and why you are in this forest when it is usually restricted to chunins and jonins?" Naruto's eyes widened a bit. Midarashi Anko is the name of Orochimaru's apprentice in the village. If he played his cards right, this could go very good or very bad. He decided to be at least partially truthful. "My name is Menma, and I am searching for rare plants to continue my studies." Anko deadpans at the 7-year-old and goes to creepiness factor 11 and uses her favorite jutsu to summon a snake to scare the kid and chuckled, "You're telling me that some brat like you goes into the Forest of Death to find some plants for a science project?" Naruto's eyes narrow a bit and started to explain what he was looking for. "I'm searching for some nightshade to mix with the venom of the poisonous tree leaves often found in this forest." Anko whistled at the potency of that venom and commented, "And what would a Gaki like you want with a poison that could kill a grown man in a few seconds?" He smiled slightly and said, "It's for my fighting style. I am training myself in poisons and medical jutsu." Anko's eyes widened a bit at that information. He was teaching himself poisons and medical jutsus? Those two fields were some of the most underestimated fields of being a ninja. Most people just liked flashy ninjutsu or fancy taijutsu. Her eyes gleamed a bit as she looked at the young prodigy. Her creepiness factor was increasing to level 12 as she licked her lips as she stared at Naruto like a predator. He was starting to get a bit nervous as he looked at the gleam in Anko's eyes. He had heard her reputation around the village for being a bit crazy. He started backing away slowly and smiled nervously. "Well, I'll go." As he started to walk away, he felt a hand clamp down on his head and he gulped nervously. Standing behind him is a shadowed Anko giggling creepily, "Hee. Well, Gaki, if you want to be a poison user, you can't find a better sensei than me." What most people did not realize about Anko is that she always wanted a student to teach her arts to. She wanted to give a student the chance to succeed that Orochimaru stole from her when he abandoned her with the curse mark. "So prepare yourself, Gaki. You will be under the supervision of the great and sexy Midarashi Anko until you graduate from the academy." She dragged him back into the forest, laughing the entire way. Naruto's only thought about the situation was how did getting caught in the Forest of Death lead to this? The academy, Konoha, initiation ceremony for all new and returning students. Training with Anko-sensei was a torture interesting experience. He had thought he had trained hard before, but Anko's training took the cake. She played games in the form of training with him. "Outrun the giant snake before it eats you, identify the hidden poison in all of your food, dodge the kunai, and her personal favorite of hide and don't get caught or you will be stabbed." He can't argue with the results though. His situational awareness level had increased exponentially. He could now be aware of his situation at all times, even if he was asleep. In addition, Anko helped him with his toxic blood problem. She had told him it was a side effect of trying to build up one's immune system too fast. She taught him a jutsu that would detoxify his blood when not in battle, and would increase its potency during battle. She also taught him the Hibi style of combat, which went excellently with his chakra scalpels and poisons. The Hibi style was similar to the Hyuga's gentle fist, except that instead of injecting chakra to one's opponent, the user injects poison through the user's attacks. The style also taught him to be extremely flexible to get into one's guard. Despite the harsh training, they eventually became good friends. Near the end of their training, he told Anko his true heritage. First flashback. It was the final day of training and they were both relaxing in one of the large branches in the Forest of Death. Anko had brought some sake and dango for them to share, one stick of dango for Naruto and the rest for Anko. Naruto was contemplating whether or not to tell Anko his heritage. She had earned his broken trust during their training and he felt slightly guilty for lying to her. He sighed and began to explain to Anko, "Hey Anko, I wanted to tell you before our training ends that I haven't been exactly truthful. I am actually the forgotten son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki." Anko looked at Menma, his fake name, and laughed, "Ha ha ha, ya good one Gaki." She laughed for a bit until she saw his serious face and frowned. "Wait, you're serious?" Menma/Naruto nodded and started to tell her his life story, of being forgotten by his parents, finding the laboratory, he did not say who last owned it, to the present. She was stunned at first and became thoughtful for a second. "I just don't get it. I've seen the Hokage's family, and they act like the perfect family. I am a master of psychology, and even I know that parents don't just abandon one kid over the other for a small thing like training one sibling." Menma frowned. He did read some psychology books and his parents did not behave as normal parents would. He pushed those thoughts to the sides and focused back on his ideas of revenge and commented bitterly, "I guess they are the exception, and they just didn't want a son." Anko patted Menma's shoulder comfortingly and commented, "Well, it seems we both had sucky childhoods then. Well, our training is at an end for now, the academy is starting soon. I know you don't need it, but good luck, Gaki." She poofed away in a shushin, taking the remaining dango with her. End of flashback. He sighed and started to walk into the entrance to the academy, ready to finally prove to his family that he is not worthless. Konoha Academy, Menma's POV. The opening ceremony for the academy is an honored tradition amongst the shinobi and civilian families. It was a time to meet the teachers, scout potential talent, and hear the Hokage's speech. The adults usually congregated around the teachers, asking questions and reviewing the curriculum for their children. The older students would congregate in their already made groups while the younger ones met new people and formed new friendships. Menma looked around the festivities, feeling slightly bored. He was not here to make friends or mingle with other students. If coming to the ceremony wasn't mandatory for all new students, he wouldn't have bothered to come. Soon 10 a.m. was approaching and everyone took their seats to hear the Hokage talk. Menma glared at Minato as he took the stage. He barely looked different in the 2 years since he last saw him. As Minato rambled on with his speech of the will of fire and protecting the village, he looked around at the rest of his classmates. It appeared as if at least one of each major clan was attending. He even saw the elusive Kurama clan heiress among the people attending. He had heard of the girl. Apparently she had awakened a special bloodline that turned her illusions real, at the cost of creating a separate personality. Though thanks to the quick actions of Kushina and Minato, the alternate personality was sealed, and she could become a shinobi. He sighed as Minato's speech ended and they all were called in for the first day of the academy. As they took their seats, the teacher started rambling on about the will of fire and the grand history of Konoha. He sighed. This was going to be a long 4 years. Academy, Konoha, 4 years after Menma started the academy. It had been 4 long years since Menma had started the academy. It had proved to be a wonderful waste of time for the majority of the day. However, he didn't complain. He knows that the academy was necessary to join the ninja ranks. He had not changed his outfit much in the last 4 years. He now wore a tan-colored trench coat, a gift from Anko, his gas mask on his neck, a black muscle shirt and umbu-style pants along with regular shinobi sandals. He was the rookie of the year for all 4 years, much to the chagrin to all of the clan children. People were sometimes comparing him to Minato, who was an orphaned rookie of the year as well. He had not shown all of his abilities during the academy, instead demonstrated himself as a rising prodigy as a medicine and poison specialist. He had revealed Anko's training as a way to cover up the skills he did demonstrate. Right behind his spot is Niji Hyuga, a boy who kept telling him that his success is fate and that he was destined to be Rookie of the Year. Yet he didn't make friends with Niji. However, he surprisingly did make a few friends during his time at the academy. He had made friends with Yakumo Kurama and Rock Lee. Kurama was the Kunoichi of the Year, and Rock Lee was the dead last. He had already figured out that these were to be his future teammates by reviewing the previous graduating classes. Every year the Rookie of the Year and the Kunoichi of the Year team up with the dead last. He supposed they balanced each other out, a taijutsu specialist, a genjutsu specialist, and a medical/poison expert. What he did not know is that in the Hokage's office they were having a meeting about the teams right now. Hokage's office, Minato's POV. All of the potential Jonin senseis were in the room along with the Hokage and academy teachers as they reviewed the graduates of the year. Minato cleared his throat and began the meeting. We have 30 potential graduates this year. I am glad the Academy curriculum has managed to produce so many potential ninjas. The Academy professors glowed with pride that they were able to teach the next generation. Now let's start with Team 1. They discussed the teams briefly and matched personalities until they arrived at Team 9. Now we have the team of the Rookie of the Year, the Kunoichi of the Year, and the Dead Last. The teachers nodded and Ira Kayumino stepped forward with the bios and information from the 3 students. First, the Dead Last. Rock Lee is a very dedicated student but has no ability to wield chakra to produce major ninjutsu or genjutsu. He is able to do the basic 3 academy jutsu and reinforce his body with chakra, but that's about all he can do. However, he is a very dedicated student and a budding taijutsu master under the tutelage of Mado Guy, who has been training the boy since the 2nd year of the academy. He turned the page on his folder. The Kunoichi of the Year, Yakumo Kurama, is a prodigy in genjutsu, almost on the level of the missing Nin Itachi Uchiha. She is rather weak in taijutsu but is excellent in ranged weaponry, especially when combined with her illusions. He flipped to the final page, and finally the Rookie of the Year, Menma, an orphan but has proved to be a prodigy in poisons and medical ability. He has worked part-time at the hospital during his academy years, and the only thing preventing him from being an active medic is his age and lack of chunin status. He is also incredibly skilled in taijutsu with Anko-san's fighting style. He has told me he has had private training with Anko in the past. Everyone shivered at that information except the Kunoichi in question. Poor kid. Irika put down the folder at the Hokage's desk and Minato perused the information on the 3 students. He found Menma interesting. As an orphan himself, he knew how hard it was to make it to Rookie of the Year without any help. However, it seems like he had a similar relationship with Anko as he had with Jiraiya. He looked up as the team senseis ended their discussion on who would be best as their sensei. Anko stepped forward along with Guy, and Anko spoke seriously. I would like to be sensei of this team. They would make an excellent assassination and escort team with Menma's poison skills, Lee's taijutsu skills, and Yakumo's genjutsu abilities. She stepped back a bit, and Guy started to speak. I would like to be allowed to continue to tutor Rock Lee privately in taijutsu. I do not question Anko's ability to teach him, but he already has a firm foundation in the strong fist fighting style. Minato processed this information. It was a good idea. Anko already had experience with Menma, while the other 2 could benefit from Anko as well. Rock Lee would not be neglected due to Guy's insistence on training him. He nodded and pressed his seal of approval on the team accepted. Team 9 will be composed of Menma, Rock Lee, and Yakumo Kurama. The sensei of the team will be Anko Mitarashi. All of the teachers and future senseis nodded and left the room. Minato frowned and looked down upon Menma's page. He was curious about Menma. What were the chances an orphan would be named after a ramen ingredient like his daughter Shio? And why did he feel a pang of guilt every time he looked at the face of Menma? What no one else knew is that behind the bars of a large cage in a sewer, a large fox chuckled to himself as he watched through Shio Uzumaki's eyes and waited to see the result of its interference. Konoha Academy, Menma's POV. Menma was seated alongside Yakumo and Lee as they waited for the teacher to announce the teams. Soon Irika Yumino came into the room and took out a sheet of paper and started to list the teams. 1 to 8 unimportant. Team 9 will be Rock Lee, Kurama Yakumo, and Menma. Your sensei will be Mitarashi Anko. Menma smiled slightly as Yakumo and Lee cheered. Team 10 will be Niji Hyuga, Tenten, and Mito Gecko. Your sensei will be Hate Gecko. Irika set down his papers and smiled at all of the graduates. I have been very glad to be your sensei for these past few years. I hope everyone's dreams come true and that everyone's will of fire will never diminish. Irika was about to continue before a canopy smashed through the window and attached 2 kunais to the blackboard. On the canopy read the sexy and single Mitarashi Anko, sensei of Team 9. At the bottom of the canopy stood Anko in a dramatic pose. Alright, all you gakis, I want to see Team 9 up on the roof in 5 minutes. She poofed into smoke soon after the announcement, leaving the entire room stunned for a few seconds before Team 9 stood up and made their way up to the roof. Academy roof, Menma POV. The trio arrived at the roof to see Anko munching on some dango as she grinned at them. Alright, you 3, name your names. Likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future, that sort of thing. Yakumo looked at Anko's outfit a bit scandalized but spoke in a respectful tone. Shouldn't you introduce yourself first, sensei? Anko grinned again and swallowed the rest of the dango and started her introduction. I am the sexy Mitarashi Anko. My likes are poisons, torture, blood, tea ceremonies, and my cute little gakis. My dislikes are a certain snake, bad dango, bad sake, and arrogant. My hobbies are working at the TNI division and hanging out in the forest of death. My dream is to kill a certain snake. Now it's your turn, Gaki 1. Yakumo looked a little affronted by the nickname but continued anyway. My name is Yakumo Kurama. My likes are genjutsu, painting, and rice balls. I dislike my alternate personality Ito, and a certain person. My hobbies are painting and studying genjutsu. My dream for the future is to be the best genjutsu user in the elemental nations. Anko looked at Lee. Alright, and you big brows? Lee jumped excitedly and spoke quickly. Yash. My name is Rock Lee. I like taijutsu, Gai-sensei, training, and curry. I do not have many things I hate, but I dislike natural-born prodigies. My hobbies are training and making curry, and my dream for the future is to surpass Gai-sensei as a taijutsu specialist. Anko nodded at that information and turned to Menma and finally Yugaskuin. Naruto scowled slightly at the nickname, but said calmly, my name is Menma, no last name. My likes include poisons, gardening, ramen, and books. My dislikes include a certain family, people who look down on medic nin, and arrogant people. My hobbies are gardening, training, and studying different poisons and their effects. I do not have a dream for the future but more of an ambition. I plan on becoming the greatest medic nin and poison user in the elemental nations. Enko smiled widely at their introductions and gave them their first instructions. Alright then, my cute little Gaki's Tamero, we will have the true Genin test at training field 9. Lee looked confused. True Genin test, sensei? Enko smirked at Lee. Of course, you didn't think to become full-fledged Genin you just needed to just pass the written test and some basic jutsu, did you? Meet me at the field at 8 a.m, and if you're late it's straight back to the academy. With those words she shoo-shined away in a whirlwind of leaves. Naruto looked at the jutsu and thought to himself, I really have to learn that jutsu. Naruto looked at his potential teammates. We should be well rested for Tamero, so make sure you go to bed early and eat a good breakfast. Knowing Enko-sensei, this test will not be easy. Yakumo and Lee nodded and they walked off in different directions, each thinking and preparing for the test the next day. Training Ground 9, Kona, Menma's POV. Training Ground 9 was traditional for the Genin Team 9 to practice in. It was a basic training field surrounded by dense forests, and an open field in the center that featured as the training ground. It was nearing 6:40 in the morning when Yakumo, Lee, and Naruto arrived at the training ground. They had each come a bit early to plan for the true Genin test. Naruto started off the planning. Alright, I have known Sensei for quite a while. She is an all-round fighter who uses primarily stealth attacks to kill or injure her opponents. She has the ability to summon snakes to aid her in battle. She is also one of the few poison specialists in the village besides myself. Both Yakumo and Lee nodded at the information and Yakumo commented, I suggest with the information we have on Sensei is to use a distraction. Lee will distract Sensei while I layer illusions while Menma finishes her off. Menma nodded at the sound plan. It probably would not work against a Jonin like Enko, but it was the best they had. Lee raised his fist to the sky and shouted, Yash. With the power of youth there is no way we cannot pass this test. Yakumo and Menma's sweat dropped. It was clear that he had already been corrupted from Guy. Suddenly he felt a chill as if someone was walking on his grave. He quickly knocked back his teammates and deflected the incoming kunai with a scalpel. Scowling a bit he sighed and spoke out loud to the woods, Sensei, do you have to throw kunai every time we get together? Enko shoo-shined in front of the group, grinning widely. Well Gaki, it's good to see you haven't lost your touch in the time we have been away from each other. If you had I would have to beat those skills back into you. Menma shivered a bit knowing she was being completely serious. What is our test today, Sensei? Enko grew serious and began to explain the test. I was going to do a special test for you Gakis. However, it is tradition for the 2 rookies of the year and the dead last take the bell test. Enko took out 2 bells and attached them to her waist. The purpose of this test is to take these bells from me. The person who does not have any part of a bell will return to the academy. All 3 students tensed. It went without saying that there were only 2 bells. Enko grinned evilly at them. You have until noon, which is in 3 hours. You may begin. All 3 students jumped into the surrounding forest. Enko looked around the forest and smirked. She may not be a sensei like Kakashi, but a green garden snake was staring at Menma from behind. A black snake was staring at Yakumo. A blue snake stared at Lee from the bushes. They can't escape her snakes. Training Ground 9, surrounding forest, Menma POV, 3 hours until test is over. He knew there has to be some sort of trick to this test. He had reviewed the previous team rosters from the Hokage's personal library. There had never been a 3-member team unless it was for a double apprenticeship, which rarely ever happens. He thought back to Enko's words, any part of a bell, and he smirked. Clever Sensei, but not clever enough. He jumped through the forest searching for his teammates. Training Ground 9, open field, Lee POV, 2.45 hours until test is over. I jumped into the field to confront our sensei. I would not fail Guy Sensei and will get a bell or I will do 500 laps around Konoha on my hands. I arrived at the field and took my stance in front of Enko-sensei and smiled widely. Greetings Sensei, I will take one of those bells now. Enko's sweat dropped at his loud entrance. You're not very smart, are you Gaki? Not answering, Lee dashed at his sensei at high chunin speeds and jumped in the air in a spinning kick leaf whirlwind. Enko easily dodged the kick and kicked Lee's side as he passed, breaking his spin and tossing him away. Lee jumped up and ran at Enko and was about to punch her when she was replaced by a log. Kawamari, he thought as he looked around for his sensei. However, as soon as he turned around, the log poofed and was replaced by Enko, who kicked him in the back into the woods. She quietly chuckled to herself. She never thought that any idiot would confuse Kawamari for Henge. In another dimension, Naruto sneezed. She looked down at a snake in the grass and it whispered information to her. Her grin widened. She knew her favorite Gaki would understand the test. Now they just had to get a bell from her. Training Ground 9, surrounding forest, Menma POV, 2 hours till test is over. He had quickly found Yakumo hiding near his location and told her his theory about the test. She had believed him and they quickly went to find Lee. They found him getting his ass kicked by Enko-sensei. It was a good thing that she was going easy on him. Last time he made a stupid mistake like that. She had copied Kakashi's 100 Years of Pain with the kunai and explosive tags. They quickly gathered Lee and explained the situation to him. He was quick to agree that they needed to work together, and they started to hash out a plan. Menma brought out 2 sealing tags and handed them to his teammates. We don't have time to make you too immune to my poison, so wear those on your chest. They will filter out the air and prevent poison from entering your lungs. Yakumo took one of the tags and looked at Menma's gas mask. Why do you wear that if you have these tags, and when did you learn sealing? Menma didn't even look sheepish as he stated seriously, it looks more badass than wearing a sealing tag. Plus those tags do not last forever, these will last around 2 hours max. I learned some sealing from Enko-sensei. A lie, but they didn't need to know that. These anti-poison seals are mandatory for any poison user to carry. They both nodded and they started their plan. Training Ground 9, Open Field, Enko's POV, 1 hour until test is over. Enko was standing in the center of the field when 3 syringes flew from the surrounding forest. She quickly dodged them but noticed 3 explosive notes wrapped around them. Shit, she cursed as they exploded. As the smoke cleared, a broken log was on the ground. Menma rushed out into the field with his chakra scalpels activates, and rushed at the now revealed Enko in a taijutsu match. He thrust a glowing palm at Enko as she dodged the thrust and retaliated with a high kick to the head. He ducked backwards beneath the kick and sprang up from the ground in a backwards cartwheel, kicking Enko in the chin in the process. As he landed on his feet, he jabbed at Enko's exposed throat with his scalpel. However, before he could get near her throat, she kneed him in the stomach, then kicked him away from her. She quickly spun around and backhanded Lee, who was about to punch her in the back. Soon she was countering a barrage of taijutsu from Lee and Menma. She smirked a bit, and caught both Lee and Menma's fists, and spun around, throwing them in opposite directions. Not bad, Gakis, but you're 100 years too early to beat me in close combat. As Menma and Lee were falling, their pained grimaces turned into smirks as a small smoke bomb near Enko's feet exploded. The field suddenly got filled with purple smoke. Enko, who was in the middle of the blast, started coughing a bit, and felt her limbs starting to become heavier. As she was coughing, that damn Gaki made a paralyzing poison that can affect me? She quickly went through hand signs and used a wind jutsu to push the poison away from her. As soon as she could see again, Menma was in front of her, a syringe on each finger covered in chakra scalpels. She took out a kunai and channeled chakra into it to deflect the jabs and slashes of Menma's needles. She had to duck as Lee proceeded to do another leaf whirlwind at her back and jumped out of the way as Menma slashed at her with his scalpels. Suddenly she felt a shift in the air as she fluxed her chakra and her 2 students disappeared, and Lee's kick was about to connect to her face while Menma was nowhere to be seen. She bent down unnaturally to dodge Lee's kick and caught a small dart in her hand that was about to enter her neck from behind. Menma emerged from the woods again. His gas mask was on his face, and a blowpipe sticking out of a section of the mouthpiece that was previously hidden behind his gas mask. Enko grinned at her 2 students. Not bad, Gakis, but not enough to take me down. Lee was about to charge her again when she pointed her arm at him and yelled Senejishu, and snakes wrapped around Lee, and she dragged him to crash him into Menma, who was charged at her from behind. She chuckled a bit before her eyes widened. Her perception had switched. It felt as if she was doing a handstand and looking up at the sky. She smirked a bit. What a nice genjutsu. She closed her eyes and with sound deflected and blocked the attacks from her 2 students as she continued to flux her chakra to get rid of the genjutsu. Suddenly she opened her eyes as she dispelled the genjutsu and dodged the attacks of her students before kicking them away from her. She smirked a bit as she saw them struggling to get up. What she was not prepared for was when Naruto suddenly shouted, "Now!" In the forest, Yakumo had just finished a painting of Enko, locked a bind of steel beams and injected chakra into the painting. In the middle of the field, Enko suddenly froze as she saw steel beams wrapped around her body. Both Menma and Lee rushed to the bells. Enko, unable to free herself from the real illusion, could not react as both bells were taken from her. She smirked as all 3 of her students stood in front of her, all smiling while Lee and Menma had the bells. She looked at all 3 of her students. All right, you Gakis, Lee and Menma have a bell, so it looks like Yakumo is going back to the academy. Menma smirked a bit and used his chakra scalpel to cut his bell in half and gave it to Yakumo. You never said we could not split the bells, sensei. And besides, this test is not about getting the bells but working together. Enko started laughing loudly. Ha ha ha. I can't wait to see Kakashi's face when he learns that my students passed his precious bell test. You were right, Menma, the point of this test was teamwork. I am proud of all of you, my cute little students. But for now I need to report the results to the Hokage. Why don't you all treat yourself to something nice for lunch while I do that? She poofed away in a shenshin. All 3 genin members grinned at each other. Lee was shouting about youth and how he made Gai-sensei proud. Yakumo was glowing with happiness that she proved her old sensei Kurenai wrong and became a genin. Menma smirked to himself as he took off his gas mask. He was now a genin 1 year before his sister. He could not wait to finally show his former parents what he could do by defeating his sister. Menma turned to his teammates and smiled a bit. Why don't we go out for some sushi? If we all pitch in, we can get some of the good stuff. They all smiled to each other again and walked to his favorite sushi bar. Hokage meeting, Konoha. 1 hour after the successful genin test, all of the jonin senseis that had already tested their students came into the room to discuss their results to their Hokage. Soon, when all of the senseis were gathered, they announced their results. Team 1 failed, Team 2 failed, Team 3 failed, Team 4 failed, Team 5 failed, Team 6 failed, Team 7, Inoku Yamanaka, Choju Akimichi, and Shiori Nara passed. Team 8, Pakura Abirame, Hibiki Izunaka, and Tajuro passed. Now it was Anko's turn. Team 9, Rock Lee, Karama Yakumo, and Menma passed. Finally Hayato walked forward and said, Team 10, Mito Gecko, Niji Hyuga, and Tenten passed. Minato nodded smiling, for teams had passed this year, which is one more than the usual amount of students to graduate. He also noticed that Team 9 had passed. He knew that team had been given the bell test, and he was curious to see how they did. Thank you everyone for your hard work. I will be seeing the senseis of the past teams here tomorrow for your first D-rank assignments. I would like Anko to stay behind for a few seconds, please. Everyone nodded and looked at Anko confused as they left the room. Minato picked out the files of Team 9. I wanted to hear your opinion of this team. It is rare that a bell test is passed. The bell test was notorious for having the highest number of failures. It was for this reason that it was reserved only for the team with the Rookie and Kunoichi of the Year. Anko nodded. Yes, Hokage-sama. I believe that this team can be a very strong fighting force in the future. Lee and Menma were keeping me on my toes with their taijutsu and poisons, while Yakumo kept me cornered with their genjutsu. If I was high chunin or even low jonin, I may have lost the battle, not just the bells. Minato looked a bit surprised. After all, it's rare to see a genin team have so much potential. He looked at the folders and couldn't help feeling pride for Menma, but he was not sure why. He looked back at Anko and smiled. Thank you, Anko-san. I will see you tomorrow to hand out your first D-ranks. Anko smiled evilly and laughed. Can't wait to see the looks on the Gaki's faces when they first do D-ranks. She continued to chuckle evilly out the building, scaring to death the people she passed through the building. Hokage's office, Konoha. One day after the genin test, Menma POV. Team 9 and their sensei were waiting for their first mission as a team. They were all excited for their first mission. They were standing in front of the Chunin who gave out D and C ranked missions. The Chunin sorted through the D rank scrolls until he pulled out a mission. Team 9. The Daimo's wife's cat Tora has gone missing. It is your job to retrieve it. All of the genins on Team 9, even Lee, deadpanned at the Chunin. Menma sighed, already expecting this from seeing all of the genin teams do meaningless tasks around the village. After several hours of chasing the damn cat, they returned to the office, heavily battle-wounded by the smug-looking cat in Yakumo's arms. The Chunin chuckled a little bit after they completed the mission and took a look at the remaining scrolls. While the only missions we have left for the day are weeding Miss Haruka's garden, repainting an elder's house. Outside the room they could hear a commotion and a woman's voice yelling shrilly, "No! Tora!" The Chunin sighed, and catching Tora again. Team 9 sighed as one as they accepted another D-rank. Training Field 9, Konoha. 1 month after Team 9's first D-rank. It was an entire month of hell for Team 9. In the morning they would constantly train with Anko and then do boring D-rank missions for the rest of the day. It was not until after their 40th D-rank mission that Anko had them gather at Training Ground 9. Anko faced her team. Alright Gakis, tomorrow we are going on our first D-rank mission. I want all of you to get a good night's sleep tonight and be well prepared for the mission. We will probably not be back for a week or two. The 3 genins looked excited and nodded as they left to prepare for their first real mission. Menma arrived at his apartment that he had bought with his money from the D-rank missions. He looked at the mirror for a bit before wiping the makeup off his cheeks, revealing 3 whisker-like marks. He did not know why he was gaining these marks. Only his sister had these marks, and she was the QB container. However, until he figured out what was happening, he would keep these marks hidden. He sighed. Only 2 more months until the Chunin exams. He knows he can't partake in the exams. He knows that Minato would never let his daughter not partake in the first Chunin exams after she graduates. He was in luck. The next Chunin exams was in Kumo. He could make an easy argument not to take the exams this time. He also figured out that Niji's team would not participate because of the history between the Hyugas and Kumo. He smiled grimly. It was just a matter of time before he faces against his sister, and at the end of it, he would be the one standing over her, and gaining his revenge by humiliating that man's daughter in front of the entire world. Inside Menma's mindscape had taken the form of a large pond surrounded by trees. In the center of the water 2 glowing red eyes appeared, slowly taking shape from the water. Finally a small fox with 1 tail emerged from the water and smirked. The chakra he had injected into the kid had finally managed to allow his consciousness and was finally large enough. Before he was sealed in the brat Shio, he had injected some of his chakra into the other kid, Naruto something. He had used that little chakra to place a genjutsu around anyone of his blood to ignore him. This allowed his plan to succeed. Without his consciousness in the seal, the Jubi could never be revived unless both his consciousness and chakra were in the Gedo Mazo statue. It was just an added bonus that he could gain his revenge against all the years chained to a giant moon in Kushina's mindscape. He looked at his small body in disdain. He would grow fast from the excess chakra in his new host's body. However, he would not be at full strength until Naruto reaches the age of 16. He slightly regretted making the kid's life so bad, but in order to defeat Madara the deception was necessary. However, the kid had grown strong away from his parents, and with his chakra they could train to defeat Madara while Shio will be the bait. He knew that Naruto would be a better host because only he knew that he was the reincarnation of Ajura, not Shio. He chuckled and delved back into the pond, knowing that it wasn't time to reveal himself to Naruto no Menma yet. Moritomo's Sushi Bar, Konoha, 6:30 a.m., Menma POV. Menma was sitting with Lee and Yakumo at their favorite sushi bar as they discussed their first C rank. Menma finished a fatty tuna sashimi before he spoke. The mission will most likely along the lines of escort or assassination. Enko already told us that's what our team was built towards. Yakumo gulped a bit. I can't believe we will really have to kill already. I know we have learned about it during the academy, but the actual knowledge that you're about to do it's scary. Lee nodded solemnly. Yes, it will be a harsh blow to our youthfulness, but it is required to become stronger as ninja. Menma chewed a bit more before looking around. I wonder why our sensei called us here. Our C rank isn't for another 4 hours. Enko arrived at their booth and sat down, stealing a salmon shishim from Menma. Well, Gaki, we are here for a very important mission that could be critical to our survival in the future. All 3 genins gulped a bit as they heard that. Enko suddenly tied Lee up. We are getting rid of this spandex and getting you a real ninja outfit. All of the genins and some of the other diners at the restaurant sweat dropped. Lee suddenly started stuttering. BB, but Enko-sensei, Guy said that this outfit will increase my youthfulness and unlock my full potential. Enko started dragging Lee out of the restaurant, chuckling a little bit. The only thing that outfit will increase if your changes of death on an assassination mission. Menma and Yakumo quickly paid for their meal and ran after his sensei, an unfortunate teammate. They found the master, an unfortunate student, at a popular clothing store for shinobi where Lee was still tied up crying crocodile tears as Enko picked out an outfit. Soon she picked out an outfit and Sparta kicked Lee into the room after untying him and gave him the outfit for him to wear. Soon he came out of the dressing room and everyone gaped at Lee. He was wearing a dark green tight latex sleeveless muscle shirt with black shinobi pants, combat boots, and arm guards with latex fingerless gloves underneath. Think Lancer's clothing from Fate/Zero. Enko grinned smugly as her choice in outfit was definitely the right one. Enko grabbed Lee and rushed out of the store while yelling now to the barber shop. Menma and Yakumo chased after the rapidly disappearing duo. Soon they arrived at the Konoha barber shop and entered to see Lee tied to one of the chairs and surrounded by evilly chuckling barbers. Menma deadpanned at his sensei. What is going on here? Enko grinned down at Menma. Well, it seems that they have been wanting to destroy that horrid bowl cut and eyebrows of his ever since they saw him on the streets a few times. They said he was on their head hunting board. She pointed to a wall where there were a bunch of photos of different men. On top of the wall said targets. Some of the most predominantly displayed were Kakashi Hatake, Jiraiya of the Sannin, and Mado Guy. Underneath Guy there was a picture of Rock Lee crossed out with a red marker. After 30 minutes a new Lee was revealed. They had trimmed his eyebrows so his eyes did not look so wide anymore. His hairstyle was now wavy in places with one strand of hair going down his forehead, Lancer's hairstyle. Both Menma and Yakumo gaped at Lee. Where had the weirdo green beast go? Lee looked forlornly at his green spandex suit in his hands and looked at Enko-sensei. Are you sure this will allow me to become a better ninja and expand my youthfulness? Enko grinned at Lee. Sure, kid. That outfit will definitely help you become a ninja. Suddenly Lee's face brightened and he shouted, yes, sensei. I will become a strong ninja with this new look. If I don't, I will do 1,000 laps around Konoha. Menma smirked a bit. There he is. Hokage's office, Konoha, Menma POV. Team 9 were standing in front of the Hokage's desk. Minato sat behind the desk along with 2 Chunin helpers and was looking at a few scrolls in a box labeled C rank. However, before he could pull out a mission, Enko stepped forward. Hokage-sama, I would like to request a hunt. A hunt was a group of missions set aside to allow genin teams used to killing. These missions usually involved destroying bandit camps around the Land of Fire. Minato raised his eyebrows and looked over at the determined team. He saw no hesitation among the genin and sighed. He always hated this part of being Hokage, forcing young kids to make their first kill. He looked at Team 9. Alright then. Your mission will be to destroy the bandit camp that was reported outside of the small town of Chixiang near the border of the Land of Earth. Do not worry about IWA Shinobi, we have a peace agreement with them, so if you encounter any they are unlikely to engage. The mission should take around 2 weeks to complete. Team 9 nodded and excited the room to prepare for their first C rank. Menma's apartment, Konoha. Menma finished packing his supplies. He was bringing 2 changes of clothes, food and preservation seals, around 100 different vials of poison with labeled effects, his medical equipment, kunai, shuriken, saban, darts, and some small arrows for his latest weapon. He rolled the sleeve of his trench coat a bit, and looked at the device Enko had gifted him with. Flashback 2 weeks ago, Menma POV. Menma was practicing a water ninjutsu exercise given to them by Enko-sensei. She had tested their affinities and Lee had lightning, Yakumo had earth, and he had water. Enko had commented that despite not being able to do jutsu, Lee could still produce nature chakra and could eventually infuse his punches and kicks with lightning chakra similar to the Reikage. Enko had Yakumo practicing some defensive earth-style ninjutsu. She had informed him that his water attacks could be a good combination with his poisons. Many poisons can become more toxic when exposed to water or evaporate in the air when upon contact to it. She had him practicing the water gunshot technique, which was the opposite of the fireball jutsu, and water prison jutsu. Both were basic C-rank water ninjutsu but could be used very effectively with his poisons. However, before any of them could use the jutsu effectively, they needed to train in their elements. She gave Lee a leaf and told him when it was crumpled into a small ball he would be given the next step. Yakumo had to turn her leaf completely into ash while he had to extract all of the water from the leaf. He was around the midway point of extracting the water before the leaf crumpled, proof that he messed up again. He sighed and looked up as Enko walked up to them carrying 3 scrolls. Team 9 stopped their training exercise and approached Enko. Sensei gave 1 scroll to each of us and explained Gaki's good news. Your wonderful and sexy sensei has decided to gift all of you with a weapon. For Lee, I asked Guy to give you one of their nunchucks. Lee's eyes widened. The Mato family was famous for their nunchuck wielders. It was said that Mato Bruce was able to go head-to-head with the second Hokage with nothing but a pair of his nunchucks. Lee unsealed the 2 nunchucks and spanned them around a bit before grinning widely. For Yakumo, this is a joint project between Menma and I. She unsealed a tanto and handed it to Yakumo. This dagger is imbued with a mix of several different poisons that will kill a grown man in around a minute with a scratch. And finally for Menma. She unsealed a very odd crossbow. It was small and attached to a fingerless glove. The glove seemed to have a reloading device that would automatically reload the crossbow. Enko grinned a bit. This little beauty is an item I found a few years ago at a random shop in the land of snow. The bolts loaded into it are unpoisoned, but she handed him a quiver of small arrows. You can poison whatever you want on these, which you can load manually. Menma nodded and put on the contraption. He looked around and noticed a target a few meters away. He pointed the arm-mounted crossbow and fired rapidly at the target, each hitting in the inner circle. He gave a small smile and thanked his sensei. Thanks, sensei. This is great. Enko saw the small smile and smirked. It was hard to get that kid to smile. End flashback. At 1 p.m. all the members of Team 9 arrived at the gate and greeted each other. Soon their sensei arrived and they jumped into the forest at high speeds, each mentally preparing for what they're about to do. Forest surrounding Chishiang. 12 p.m. Northern Land of Fire. 3 days since Team 9 set out from Konoha, Menma POV. Team 9 was hiding in the trees looking over the bandit camp. The camp was hidden in a clearing surrounded by trees north of Chishiang. They were discussing their plan to wipe out the bandits. Enko began to tell them the plan. Alright. I want Yakumo to maintain a genjutsu around the camp to prevent their escape, and to remain undetected. Menma, spread your poison gas around the camp. Lee, when Yakumo and Menma complete their tasks, I want you to go in and start killing the guards. Then we will all enter at the 3 entrances to the camp to kill the rest of the bandits. Everyone nodded. Yakumo's POV. I got into position at the east entrance, and quickly began to go through some hand seals and whispered Temple of Nirvana. Soon all of the guards around the camp saw feathers in front of their eyes and fell asleep. Menma POV. He crouched upon the largest tree at the southern entrance, and manually inserted a syringe into his crossbow and fired them to critical spots around the bandit camp. Soon the camp was littered with syringes. Lee's POV. Lee arrived at the west entrance to the bandit camp and took out his nunchucks and breathed deeply before activating a seal on his tongue to filter out the air from the poison. Enko's POV. She stood silently away from the camp observing their progress and was impressed. These Gakis were doing pretty well on their first time. She frowned and looked a bit to the north. Her snakes had picked up a large man approaching the camp they were about to attack, and she was worried. Menma's POV. Menma froomed a hand seal and whispered Katsu. And all of the syringes he launched into the camp exploded with a noxious purple gas throughout the camp. He quickly put on his gas mask before running into the camp to help Lee, who was already battling some of the coughing bandits. He rolled under a wild swing by a bandit and shot him with a crossbow bolt before peppering the bandits around Lee with arrows. Not to waste arrows, he quickly activated his chakra scalpels and started to kill more bandits. Lee's POV. Spinning his nunchucks around at startling speeds, he broke bones and necks of bandits around him as he entered the camp like a whirlwind, striking at any bandit he could see and avoiding any of the wild strikes of the bandits coughing from the poison in the air. Yakumo POV. Grabbing the tanto from the sheath on her left shoulder, she quickly entered the camp, cutting any bandit that got too close to her as she started to seal any supplies and stolen goods the bandits had. She would return all of the stolen items to the village after this was over. Menma POV. Soon no bandits remained and bodies were littered around the camp. He closed his eyes a bit as he heard Lee and Yakumo throw up in the forest after their first skills. He knew he should feel worse about killing for the first time. But a part of his humanity died a long time ago when he first picked up Orochimaru's journal. He wished he felt worse about killing the bandits. But all he felt inside was a hollowness that he couldn't describe. He felt a hand on his shoulder, and he flinched before opening his eyes and saw Enko with a hand on his shoulder. You okay, Menma? In the back of his mind he realized this was the first time she had called him by his name instead of brat or gaki. He nodded slowly. I will be fine, it will just take a bit to get used to. Enko nodded, understanding. However, before they could leave back to Konoha, Enko suddenly grabbed us and sushined out of the way as one of the largest men that he had ever seen slammed a huge mace on the ground, cracking it heavily and kicking up a bunch of dust. When the dust settled, the man was revealed to Team 9. He was a giant of a man at 7 feet tall and was heavily muscled. He had scraggly dark brown hair and a large beard. He carried a large 2-handed mace with an anvil-sized head. On his forehead was the symbol of IWA with a slash crossing it. He chuckled deeply at their ready stances. So 4 tree huggers think they can beat me? Enko narrowed her eyes. Rogan the Butcher, a rank missing nin known for slaughtering entire towns in the Land of Fire during the last war. Went rogue a couple of years ago since Hitsuchikage signed the peace treaty. What are you doing in this area? Behind her back she made a few hand signs to her team. Rogan grinned darkly. I was just about to have fun in the town nearby. I heard there was a bunch of scum living there, and I wanted to clean it up. But here I am with a bunch of newborn genin ninjas and a horde Konoha kunoichi. This will be fun. With those words he lifted his mace, and quickly swung it at me. I jumped away from the mace, firing bolts from my crossbow at high speed, but most of the arrows were deflected as he spun his mace around. We all charged at Rogan, but he simply grinned again, and started spinning around with his mace, forcing us all to get back before we were clubbed. He stopped spinning suddenly and kicked Yakumo away from him into the woods harshly. Lee yelled Yakumo, before having to dodge a fast swing by Rogan, but ended up getting backhanded by him straight into a tree and was knocked out. I quickly went through some hand seals and used one of the few ninjutsu he learned from Orochimaru's notes. He cupped his hands together and converted some of his chakra into poison, and a small black ball appeared between his hands, and he shouted Dokujin no Jutsu. And a large blast of black smoke appeared from his hands straight at the butcher. Rogan saw the cloud and quickly went through some hand seals and clapped his hands together. A wall of earth separated him from the poisoned cloud. As the cloud hit the wall started to dissolve. Rogan quickly charged at Menma with his anvil. Menma activated his chakra scalpels and Anko drew two longer than normal kunai, and they engaged him in taijutsu. They were locked in combat for around 2 minutes before Rogan slammed the handle of his mace into Anko's stomach before knocking her out with another hit from his mace. Seeing his sensei fall made something snap inside of Menma. He unsealed a syringe from a seal on his wrist and injected it into his arm. Rogan was confused as Menma injected something into himself. Time seemed to slow, and all Menma could hear was a heartbeat steadily speeding up. He started frothing at the mouth a bit, and his eyes turned pure white. Rogan looked a bit alarmed at this development, and charged at Menma, preparing to strike him down before he finished whatever he was doing. However, as he struck the genin, his mace hit blackened skin, and his mace was stopped dead. Soon this darkness was spreading all across Menma until he was completely covered except his eyes, and a jagged smile played across the thing's mouth. The poison that he injected himself with was one of Orochimaru's more brilliant creations. He took the venom of the chakra eater, a special type of mosquito that injects its poison into its victim that absorbs its chakra. He took a syringe full of it and injected it with the chakra of several bestial creatures from the forest of death. He also mixed it with the venom of the fossilized snake, a snake that hardens the chakra system with its venom when it bites an opponent. When injected into a human, the results are what is displayed. The venom causes chakra to harden in the chakra pathways and allows the human body to become invulnerable and have the senses and fighting instinct of a predator. In exchange, one has no control over their body until the effect wears off. Rogan was hard-pressed to do anything against the bestialized Menma as he constantly guarded the clawed attacks of Menma. Soon several cuts and scrapes dotted the butcher. Menma fought like a beast, constantly scratching, cutting, and biting at Rogan until eventually the man's mace missed, and he cut the Missanine's throat open. Rogan spluttered a bit, and died looking at the roaring in victory face of his killer. Soon the effects of the enhancer wore off and Menma fell to the ground, exhausted. He looked at his skin and noticed it was not purple. He had read that a side effect of the enhancer was that the last test subject, some guy called Mundo, was purple for a month after the poison was injected into him. He looked at his sensei and crawled to her, and his hands started to glow green. He healed her to the best of his ability, then passed out from chakra exhaustion. Inside Menma's mindscape, Kyubi looked through Menma's eyes. He fought Rogan. He was impressed despite himself as he saw the boy fight a jonin. As a reward for the kid, he decided to use a little of his corrosive chakra to prevent any negative side effects of the stuff he injected himself with. He looked around the pond a bit, and looked at an hourglass on the shore of the lake. His illusion over the Namikaze family would not last for much longer than a year. He sighed a bit, and prepared to meet his new container at the end of the year. He hoped the kid would forgive him for his deception. Shixiang, Land of Fire. One day after the battle, Menma POV. It was a bright morning when Menma slowly opened his eyes. He winced at the bright light hitting his eyes from the window as he sat up in bed, warily looking around him. He was in a modest but comfortable hotel room. Soon after he woke up, Anko entered the room with a tray of breakfast. He saw the food and his stomach growled. He realized he was very hungry. Anko sat down near him and he asked through eating his eggs what happened. Are Yakumo and Lee alright? Anko nodded yes. Yakumo was lucky. She fell into some mud and it cushioned her fall a bit. As for Lee, he woke up a few hours before you did. Seeing how he is currently running around the village, he appears to be fine. I woke up around 30 minutes of being unconscious. You shouldn't use your chakra so recklessly to heal me, brat. You were suffering from severe chakra exhaustion. I'm surprised you're up already. But Anko suddenly turns deadly serious, making Menma gulp a bit. What the hell was that poison you took? I found the needle sticking out of your arm and found Rogan looking as if an animal attacked him. Menma looked away from Anko. It was a steroid that I created. Anko looked a bit angry. Bullshit. I know what we have worked on together, and that steroid was way too advanced for a rookie genin to completely demolish one of the highest ranked A-rank missing nin in the bingo book. The only reason that man was not S-rank is because he is only wanted in Konoha and IWA. A little known fact about becoming S rank in the bingo book is that you need to be wanted at A rank by 3 different ninja villages. Menma sighed a bit, contemplating what to do. He knew this may make her hate him, but he owed her the truth. He unzipped his trench coat and pulled down his shirt to show a seal on his heart, and unsealed Orochimaru's journal. He handed it to Anko. Anko took the journal and started flipping through it, getting angrier as she continued to read the experiments that her former mentor conducted. She looked up, more angry than he had ever seen her. What the hell, Gaki? Where did you find this? This is one of Orochimaru's personal journals. Menma winced a bit at her tone. When I was locked out of the Namikaze estate, I found one of Orochimaru's hidden laboratories near a training ground I used. I had just decided to get revenge on my former family, but I had no one to train me. I had no resources, no mentor, and no allies, so I decided to learn from his journals. Anko's angry expression softened a bit. Menma, you can't just live your life for revenge. I have seen people, including my former mentor, walk that path. All of them either ended up dead or a worse monster than the person they wished revenge on. Anko hugged Menma as a mother would. Menma, no, Naruto, you do not need to become a monster like my former sensei. A good friend of mine once told me that in order to become truly strong, you need something precious to fight for. Revenge isn't something precious to you. It is just an empty emotion of hatred that will continue to corrupt you. When your revenge is complete, you're left with nothing but more hatred. Mentally, she was thanking the third Hokage for telling her this after she was abandoned by Orochimaru, or she would have no clue what to say to this kid. For the first time since he was 5, Naruto felt tears running down his face as he was hugged for the first time in his memory. He thought back to all the times he was forgotten by his family, and how they doted on Shio. He still felt the burning hatred for his former family, but he then thought of Lee, Yakumo, and Anko, and he felt happy for the first time in a long time. He smiled, a true warm smile. He would be the best of both worlds. He would prove to his former family that he was better than Shio, but he would not do it Orochimaru's way. He would become powerful and protect his precious people. He wrapped his arms around Anko and said softly, "Thank you, Ka-san." Anko smiled a bit. "No problem, brat." Exit of Chixiang, Land of Fire, Menma's POV. Team 9 was preparing to leave Chixiang when 4 IWA shinobi jumped down in front of them. Team 9 quickly got into fighting stances, but the leader raised his hand. "Hold, we are not here to fight." Anko didn't loosen her guard and spoke. "What are you doing here then?" The leader of the IWA group stepped forward a bit. He was a tall man with a rather large nose. He was dressed in the formal IWA Jounin outfit. He stopped a good distance from their group. "My name is Katsuchi, Jounin of Iwagakure, with my genin team, Kuratsuchi, Akatsuchi, and Suzumabachi Kamizuro. We had heard that Rogan the Butcher was in the area and came to take him out, but it seems that we were too late." Anko nodded and relaxed a bit. "Yes, my genin team and I defeated Rogan." Katsuchi looked a little impressed as he observed the 3 genin. "Yes, and I would like to thank you on behalf of IWA for his death. However, we would like to request that you return the hammer of the first Tsuchikage to us." Rogan had stolen it before he went rogue. Anko looked surprised. "The hammer of the first Tsuchikage? The diamond helm? We did not know that he was carrying such a renowned weapon. I would have thought he would have used some of its abilities." Katsuchi nodded. "The hammer has seals to prevent the unworthy of using it. You may keep the body of Rogan. He is rightfully yours to cash in the bounty." Anko took out the scroll they had sealed the hammer in and handed it to Katsuchi. The IWA Jounin unsealed the mace and inspected it a bit before nodding and sealing it back into the scroll. He looked at the group. "That Tsuchikage will hear of this. It will definitely help ease some of the tensions after the peace treaty to hear that a Konoha team returned one of our greatest relics of the first Tsuchikage." Anko nodded. The IWA team departed, but Menma noticed the girl Kuratsuchi look at him speculatively before jumping away with the rest of her team. Anko sighed in relief. That was Katsuchi, the Great Earth Shaker. He is an S-class ninja of IWA and slated to become the next Tsuchikage. During the last war he was famous for remodeling an entire forest into an earthen terrain for his allies. We were lucky they weren't hostile, or we would have stood no chance. The genin shivered, for their usually unflappable sensei to be wary spoke volumes of that man's skill. Menma looked at the sun, which was approaching noon. "Well, we need to report this to the Hokage, so let's head back as quickly as possible." Everyone nodded and they jumped into the forest, heading at full speed back to Konoha. Hokage's office, Konoha. 3 days after the events at Chixiang, Minato's POV. Minato deadpanned at the report in his hands. How did a C rank turn into an encounter with a high A rank missing Nin, and then an encounter with the S-class IWA Jounin Katsuchi? He sighed. "Well, I am glad that no one was injured during this mission. I am also proud that you 3 defeated Rogan the Butcher. The bounty on his head will be split among the 4 of you." He smiled a bit. "I also want to thank you for returning that weapon back to IWA. I have already been sent a message from the Tsuchikage with a thank you and the information that he is sending a genin team to the next Chunin exams in Konoha. This is the first time IWA has participated in a Chunin exam sponsored by the village since the system was made." Anko grinned. "All in a day's work, Hokage-sama." He deadpanned at the Jounin sensei. "I hope it isn't a daily thing. You are very lucky this time. However, due to the unforeseen variables in this mission, I bumped it up to A rank and you will earn the appropriate pay alongside the bounty of Rogan." "Congratulations." Yakumo and Lee cheered while Menma smirked. The pay of an A-rank mission would cover his living expenses for the next year. Konoha streets, 6 months later, Menma's POV. The information that a genin team had killed the infamous Rogan the Butcher spread like wildfire throughout the village. Rogan was one of the most hated IWA shinobi from the last war. To hear that a genin team managed to kill him made them pretty well known throughout the village. Soon they got into the habit of training with Enko, doing some D ranks and the occasional C rank. However, none of their C ranks were as exciting as their first one. They had skipped the Chunin exams in Kumo along with Team 10. They heard that Team 7 and 8 disbanded due to 2 deaths and some promotions, leaving the spots open for this year's graduating class. Currently he was spying on this year's graduating class. He wanted to scout out the competition and potential allies of the next generation. He also wanted to see the progress of his former sister. He noticed a few potential threats in the class. Uchiha Sasuke was the shinobi of the year at the moment, while his sister, Uzumaki Namikaze Shio, was the rookie and kunoichi of the year. The dead last of their generation was an Inazaka member named Kiba, the younger brother to the clan heiress. Today for their class it seemed as if they were demonstrating ninjutsu. Sasuke did a fireball jutsu, as expected of an Uchiha member. It was their calling card after all. Kiba did his clan jutsu Fang over Fang. Most of the academy students did simple henges or bushin no jutsus. When it was finally Shio's turn, she went through some hand seals and bit her thumb and yelled Kichios no jutsu. And she appeared standing on a large frog. He froze, staring at the sight of the frog. He had known that Shio would eventually summon frogs. But he had figured that she would not be given the contract until she was Chunin at least. He frowned angrily. He could not beat his sister if she had an entire clan of toads to back her up. Minato had held down the Kyuubi with the boss summon of the Toad clan. He would stand no chance. He dashed to his hidden training grounds thinking deeply. He needed a summoning contract, that was for sure. However, the only contracts that he knew of in Konoha were the Nara clan's deer summoning contract, the Akimichi's butterfly contract, the tortoise contract of the Mato clan, and the toad contract belonging to his former family and Jiraiya of the Sannin. He frowned again. Trying to summon without a contract is incredibly dangerous. However, if one managed to gain a summoning contract through this method, they're bound to get stronger. Many famous shinobi who had passed the test of their most naturally aligned clans became extremely famous ninjas. The best examples of this would be the 3 Sannin, each now S-rank ninjas. He knew he would not stand a chance against the Toad clan, even if he was more powerful than their summoner. Feeling a steely resolve settle over him, he left to find his sensei, Enko's apartment. Knocking on the door, Menma waited for Enko. His sensei opened the door and looked at him annoyed. What do you want, Gaki? There is no training for this week. He nodded. I know, sensei, I just wanted to inform you I am going to do some solo survival training in the Forest of Death for the next week and I will not be in contact. Enko nodded. Be careful, Gaki. The tigers are a bit frisky since it's close to mating season. Menma nodded before running to the forest. When he was far enough and he breathed in a bit to calm himself. Summoning without a contract is not illegal, but he would be the first unsponsored orphan to attempt this. All of the past people to summon animals without a contract either had special training from a clan or a high-ranking jonin. He went through the hand seals he had memorized from Shio and bit his thumb before saying quietly Kuchios no jutsu. With that he disappeared in a plume of smoke. Uncone Forest, Menma POV. Menma crouched down on the ground as he arrived, looking around the area cautiously. The area he had landed on seemed to be pretty similar to the Forest of Death. He assumed he had summoned himself into a land creature's domain, so that removed sea creatures or any type of bird. The area also did not look like a swamp, so that removed reptiles. He looked around a bit more, expecting to see some overly large animal appear from the forest, but he could see nothing. What he did not know is that he is being watched at the moment. All around the forest tiny eyes peered at him as they considered the latest potential summoner. They had not had a potential contract holder for centuries. Menma continued to walk down the only path in the forest. He still did not see any potential summoning animal. He saw several insects, small animals, but none that seemed to be summonable. He pulled his larger crossbow from his back. He had bought this weapon from the latest shipment of weapons from the Land of Snow. The weapon ran on chakra and could reload arrows extremely quickly. He had made the weapon even more deadly by poisoning all of the arrows. Eventually he reached a clearing with an extremely large spider web. The web was constructed to look like a small city and was crawling with hundreds upon hundreds of spiders in different sizes. Some were as large as trucks while others the size of his fingernail. He put on his gas mask and cautiously approached the nest, wary of any potential attack. As he passed, many of the spiders turned to look at him curiously, or at least he thought it was curiously. It was hard to tell their emotions. Soon he arrived the center of the nest where a large throne was erected. He was confused. Why would a throne be here that was meant for a humanoid person? Before he could walk further, hundreds of spiders converged on the throne, seemingly merging into a human. Soon the blob of spiders gained color, and the person was revealed. She was a tall woman with flowing black hair, eyes that instead of a pupil had a classic spider web pattern. She wore a black dress with spider web pattern straps, Arachne, Soul Eater. The lady smiled motherly at Menma and put a black fan in front of her mouth as she spoke. It has been so long since a human has entered this realm. We have been waiting so long for a true summoner of our race. He stared at the being in front of him. Who are you? I doubt you are human if you are here. The women didn't seem offended. No, I am not. My name is Arachne, the collective consciousness of all the spiders of this realm. He felt his eyes widened. So you are the hive mind of all of these spiders? Arache nodded yes. Only a few of the spiders here have true awareness like other summoning creatures. However, an advantage of this is that I can control any spider, not only of this realm. For example, I know that your family abandoned you. I know where each member of your family is. I even know that your mentor, Anko, burned her dinner last night and was forced to eat out. He gaped at such an information-gathering ability. If what she was saying is true, she had the power to see through the eyes of every spider on Earth. That would outstrip any sensing ability he had ever heard of from anyone. He gulped a bit before becoming serious. What is your challenge to becoming a summoner of the Spider Clan? The woman tapped her chin in thought. The Spider Clan had never had a test for their summoner because no one had ever wanted her contract. She looked at the young man before her. She knew everything about him that she saw through her spiders. She knew he was a driven young man that would become very powerful in the future. She licked her lips a bit and spoke. I know almost your entire life, Menma, or should I say Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I know how powerful you can be in the future. Your fighting style is very similar to ours as well. I will give you the summoning contract. I wanted to gape at how easy that was, but I retained control over my emotions this time. I thank you, Queen Arache. Could you please explain the abilities of your contract? Arache nodded. The spider contract is not one of the most powerful contracts in terms of open combat, but in terms of subversion, intelligence gathering, and assassination we are unparalleled. We are able to locate and listen to any conversation where a spider can access. Finally, we can teach you our brand of senjutsu. I couldn't help but widen my eyes at the last bit of information. Senjutsu was only from the most rare of contracts. Each clan had their own brand of senjutsu. From what he read from Minato's notes is that the Toad clan boosts one's abilities by a factor of 10. He looked at Arache seriously. What is the purpose of your senjutsu? Arache smiled her motherly smile and explained. Our last summoner, Elise, was able to turn into a rather impressively large black widow spider. She gained the ability to access the collective consciousness of the spiders like I am able to. Finally, she gained the ability to use acid-based attacks. I believe she called it acid release. He thought of the possibilities of those powers. By being able to turn into a large spider would be extremely useful in combat. By entering the consciousness of every spider, his sensory ability would be unparalleled. However, the acid release drew his attention the most. That ability would go perfectly with his fighting style. He looked at Arachne. How does one learn your style of senjutsu? Arache frowned a bit. Other clans require you to absorb the errant nature chakra in the air. We use a special type of toxin to give you our abilities. However, this toxin is extremely deadly and requires thorough training in resisting poisons. He smirked a bit at that. I have trained myself for 6 years in resisting poisons. I will be able to handle it. Arache smirked a bit. What a convenient summoner. Elise required years of poison resistance training before she was able to undergo the vile Ma toxin. She took out an ancient-looking vial from a spider and approached Menma. She cut herself with a knife and black blood flowed into a wooden goblet, filling it halfway. She then poured the crystal-clear concoction from the vial into the cup, filling it to nearly the brim. She handed the cup to Menma and spoke seriously. This will hurt you more than anything that has happened in your life. It will feel as if every cell in your body is melting and every nerve cell will hurt horribly. We will wrap you in one of our healing cocoons until the process is complete. The vile Ma toxin will take 3 days to fully integrate with your body. After that, if you live, it will take around a week for you to heal. Menma nodded and mentally prepared himself as he drank deeply from the goblet. As soon as he finished the drink, spiders immediately started wrapping him in a cocoon. He barely acknowledged the spider silk around him as he felt an enormous amount of pain spreading through his body. The pain was worse than the time he overdosed on black widow venom to immunize himself. As he started to pass out, he thought of his friends, Lee's encouraging thumbs up and a sunny smile. Yakumo's soft smile, hands clasped behind her back as she encouraged him on. Anko's smirk as she told him to survive or she would find a way to make his afterlife hell. He smiled a bit in the cocoon. The pain seemed to dull a bit as he continued to think of his friends' encouragements. His precious people were waiting for him to return. Yeah, he would not die here. Forbidden Forest, Spider Realm, 10 days after vile maw venom was injected, Menma POV. Menma slowly opened his eyes and looked around. He was laying on a hammock made out of spider silk in one of the cocoon-looking houses the spiders lived in. He got up from the hammock and rubbed his eyes a bit. His entire body felt sore from the senjutsu process. Though he could already tell some of the benefits of senjutsu, he could sense some spiders skittering around the forest. He could also tell that he had about 20% more chakra than normal. He sighed a bit before looking around the room, and saw a mirror and stepped in front of it. His eyes widened a bit. His once light blonde, almost white hair had turned midnight black. His bangs were longer, now hanging a bit past his chin, Medusa's hairstyle after absorbing Arachne. Under his right eye there was a half spider web pattern. He sighed a bit looking at his face. Anko would flip out. Not only had he been gone for 3 days longer than he had told her, but his change in appearance would also spark her rage. He sighed again before looking down and noticing his lack of cloths, and he blushed. He looked around and saw some clothes laid out for him. There was a black sleeveless hoodie with 2 silver spiderweb patterns on the hood, baggy shinobi-style black pants, and shinobi-style black sandals. His gas mask laid on top of the clothes. He sighed a bit and put on the outfit and found them very comfortable. They felt like silk but seemed to be very durable. He left the cocoon home and found Arachne still sitting on her throne drinking some wine, or at least he hoped it was wine. She turned to him and smiled warmly. "Ah, so you survived, good, your human friends have been worrying. I would return soon so you can calm them." He winced a bit at the reminder that his friends were most likely worried. He nodded to Arachne. "Thank you for your help and the chance to become a summoner for this clan. I will make sure to honor the Spider Clan." Arachne chuckled a bit and waved her fan. "No need to be so formal. It has been a long time since we have had a summoner, and I so hope you bring some interest to this boring lifestyle of mine. Come back soon for some training in the art of our senjutsu. Also, if you wish to summon me, just do the normal summoning jutsu, but also call out my name. I will come." "Tada." She snapped her fingers and Menma disappeared in a poof of smoke, and she smirked a bit. What an interesting boy. Forest of Death front entrance, Konoha. As soon as he appeared in a poof of smoke, his sweat dropped as he saw Anko at the front entrance, looking murderously at him. She marched up to him and hit him on the side of his head. "Hard, you little idiot. Do you know how worried I was when you did not come back the 7th day? No, of course you didn't. You were off gallivanting with the Spider Clan." He looked at her wide eyes. How did she know he had interacted with the Spider Clan? Anko glared at him and continued, "I know you signed the Spider contract because every allied summoning clan knows when a new summoning bond is formed. You're lucky that the snakes have been allied with the spiders for generations and told me you were the one who accepted the contract, or I would have alerted the village that you were missing." Menma sighed a bit at this. At least he would not have to explain to Anko the change of his appearance. He looked to the still furious face of Anko and spoke calmly. "I needed an edge against Shio's toads, so I took a calculated risk to get my own summoning contract." Anko whacked him upside the head again. "You should have at least told me what you were attempting. I could have helped prepare you for the more unfriendly summoning clans. If you had been transported to the Shark or Alligator clan, you would have had to prove yourself in combat against the son of their boss summon. They're famous for killing all potential summoners but the strongest." He winced a bit at that information. He really was lucky to get the spiders. Though he wondered what they would have done if Arachne had not approved of him, and he shivered a bit. Anko seemed a bit calmer than before. "We need to see the Hokage Gaki. He has called us and Team 10 for something." Hokage's office, Konoha. Soon Teams 9 and 10 were gathered in the Hokage's office waiting for him to speak. He looked at the teams, pausing on Menma to look at his new style and web markings before continuing his observations. Minato looked up from their files. "Team 9 and 10, I have read your files and have been impressed by your 2 teams' progress. However, as you know, the next Chunin exams will be hosted in Konoha in 8 months. For the first time since the first Shinobi War, all 5 nations will be competing." Both teams' eyes widened. Every nation would be competing in this Chunin exams? Menma stepped forward a bit. "Hokage-sama, why is Kumo participating in this tournament? I thought that tensions were high between our 2 villages." Minato nodded. "Yes, we have not had the best relations with Kumo ever since the Hyuga incident. However, since 4 of the 5 nations were participating, they decided to send a team as well. It is for this reason that I am not sending both your teams on any more C ranks until the Chunin exams." Everyone wanted to protest a bit, but a look from the Hokage stopped them. "I know it is a bit unfair, but you will be receiving pensions for your lost earnings. I do not want any of you to be injured or potentially assassinated by competing countries while you are out of the village. You may be allowed to do D ranks, but I want you all to train and do your best to prove your worth to the other nations in the next exams. Now everyone but Anko and Menma please leave. We still have one more thing to discuss." Everyone nodded and everyone but Anko and Menma left the room. Minato looked at Menma. "I noticed you dyed your hair and got a tattoo. Unfortunately, you will have to retake your shinobi license photo. I wish you luck in the upcoming Chunin exams." Anko and Menma nodded and left to retake his shinobi license. Training Ground 9, Konoha. 1 hour after the Hokage meeting, all of the members of Team 9 were at their usual training ground. Lee and Yakumo were pestering Menma on the reason for his sudden change in look. He sighed a bit. "I changed my look because I gained a summoning contract." Yakumo and Lee's eyes widened. Lee's eyes suddenly seemed to catch fire. "Yash. That is so youthful, Menma. With your comrades we will be able to increase our teamwork and our youth." Yakumo deadpanned a bit at Lee's usual behavior and turned to Menma. "Congratulations, Menma, with your new summoning contract. With the web markings, I'm guessing you are able to summon spiders? They would fit you." He nodded. "Yes, I have been accepted as their summoner. These changes are due to a process they did to make me more compatible with their techniques." After discussing the Spider Clan a bit more, they began team training by including spiders of various sizes into their exercises. After 3 hours of this, Lee had to go train with Guy for his afternoon practice, and Yakumo had clan training. Anko went to hang out with Kurenai. Soon Menma was standing alone in the training field, contemplating what to do. He thought for a bit longer before running through some hand seals and bidding his thumb Kuchios no Jutsu. "Arachne, The Spider Queen appeared and looked around a bit before smiling at Menma. It has been a while since I left the spider realm. However, I did not expect to be summoned this early by you. What did you need? He looked at Arachne seriously. I have 8 months to prepare for the Chunin exams. I would like you to train me in some of the skills the Spider Clan has access to. Arachne frowned a bit, tapping her chin. In that amount of time you can learn the acid release and some of the less known techniques the Spider Clan utilizes with chakra strings. It takes years to learn the spider transformation and learning my sensory technique. He nodded, expecting that information. I would be willing to learn the acid release. And could you explain some of the other skills you could teach me with chakra strings? Arachne nodded. Our chakra string techniques are the foundation of our spider silk techniques. We spread our chakra in a web formation to guide where we send our silk. However, we discovered that we can use this chakra web to sense, and snare, and kill our opponents. We adapted this technique for future summoners. Menma nodded, preparing for the training with Arachne. Konoha Academy, graduating day, 6 months after training with Arachne. During the 6 months that Arachne tutored him was quite enjoyable. He learned that Arachne, despite comprising all the knowledge and sentience of most of the spiders in the world, had her own personality. She was a nice woman if a bit skewed morally wise. She viewed any spider as her son or daughter and had taken to calling him Eggling. She had taught him a great deal in these 6 months. He had gotten acid release to a basic level and could use them like water ninjutsu. He had also learned to form chakra strings from any tenketsu of his body to form a web around him. This web can be used to detect people similar to the Byakugan. He could also channel his acid release through the web and cause various effects on his enemies. He could not inject too many lethal poisons into his chakra yet, but he has managed to spread his acid release in a paralyzing mixture. He was spying on the graduating class again, leaning against the outer wall as he observed the graduates. Today was the day they would take their final exams to become genin. He spotted his former family, some village nobles, and shinobi clans congratulating their children for graduating. Soon he spotted a head of blonde hair and focused on his former sister. She had changed from a little brat the last time he saw her to a young woman. She had a hairstyle similar to Minato's but had a spiky ponytail similar to Jiraiya of the Sannin. She wore a dark blue turtleneck and forest green shinobi pants with dark green shinobi-style sandals. On the back of her shirt the Uzumaki swirl was imprinted. He felt the hatred he held for his sister and his former family rise to the surface, but he kept it in check from showing on his face. He knew he would get his revenge in 2 months when they fought in the Chunin exams. He turned away and walked away, pulling up his hood as he did so. Shio's POV. Shio was having one of the best days of her life. She had woke up to see the smiling faces of her family, and had rushed to get ready for the exams. When she had arrived at the classroom she met her friends and they talked for a bit before Irika entered the room and handed out their tests. After the exams she was extremely proud of herself. She was finally a genin of Konoha. She would soon surpass her Tusan and become Hokage. Databeo, she was basking in the happiness radiating from her parents. What she hadn't told her parents is she had the ability to sense emotions. This ability had emerged a year ago, and she could not understand how she got it. However, she had abused this ability to tell what other people thought of her. It came as a surprise to her when she felt a deep hatred being directed at her and her parents. She looked around and saw a boy leaning near the wall of the academy. He wore a leaf headband around his arm, so he was a shinobi. He was probably one of the oddest people she had seen. He had black hair with front bangs that stretched down past his chin and spiked hair in the back. He had pupilless blue eyes with a spider WP tattoo under his right eye. What caught her attention, however, was that he was radiating so much hatred. However, under the deep hatred she felt she could sense emotions such as sadness, envy, and loneliness. She turned to her Tusan and pointed at the boy who was walking away. Tusan, who is that boy? Minato turned to the back of the boy she pointed to and said, that is Menma. He was the rookie of the year last year. He surprised many by beating several clan members for the top spot. Why? She looked at the retreating boy again thoughtfully. No reason. Tusan. Hidden training ground. Later that night, Menma POV. Menma was training in his chakra webs when he detected someone heading his way at Chunin speeds. He turned to look at the man approaching and saw the academy teacher Mizuki. He was holding a large scroll on his back that he recognized immediately, the forbidden scroll where he stole many of his techniques as a child. He went through some hand seals and used one of his latest techniques, acid release, sticky binding web no jutsu. This jutsu was one of the most simple acid release techniques. It allowed for an untoxic sap-like substance to travel along the web and quickly hardening while maintaining its stickiness. Soon the chakra strings around him became visible and Mizuki stuck to some of his web. He called out to his former sensei, Mizuki-san, I would ask that you surrender and return the forbidden scroll before I kill you. He took out his crossbow from the holster on his back to increase his threat. Mizuki looked enraged that he was being talked down to by a genin. As if I am going to surrender to you. I am an elite chunin, while you're just a genin. He took off one of his 2 giant shurikens to cut the sticky rope binding him and threw it at Menma. Menma felt a truly twisted smile stretch across his face. This is the first true battle he had since Rogan, and he was itching to test out some of his new abilities. He easily dodged the shuriken and went through some hand signs. His chest expanded a bit, and he spoke, acid release, acid shot. Small balls of acid shot from his mouth in a gun-like fashion at Mizuki. He dodged and the balls of acid started to eat through the trees they hit. Mizuki looked at the damage wide-eyed. What the hell are you? You should only be a weak genin. He looked at the raging man and spoke. It's not that I'm too strong, it's just that you are too weak. With those words he took out his crossbow and channeled his chakra through it, and started firing at the rapidly dodging Mizuki. Soon arrows could be seen sticking throughout the tree line in an intricate formation. What Mizuki could not see are the chakra strings connecting the arrows. His twisted smirk widened a bit, and went through some hand signs again. Acid release, paralytic scattering due. Soon the web of chakra lines above them started to grow damp with acid, and the lines started to rapidly vibrate, dripping almost like rainfall on their location, each blob of water a potent paralyzing solution designed to mimic morning dew. Soon Mizuki was drenched from the paralyzing rain. He started to walk up to Mizuki, a chakra scalpel forming in his hands. However, he was distracted when his former sister Shio burst into the clearing. Mizuki, return the forbidden scroll. She paused as she observed the situation. Mizuki was seemingly passed out on the ground and Menma was standing above him with glowing hands. She felt the sickening emotions of Mizuki and the cold feeling she felt from Menma earlier. What the hell happened here? Databeo? Menma smirked a bit at his former sister. I defeated the traitor Mizuki. Your ANBU guard should be here to take him away soon. As soon as he said that, 2 masked ANBU members dropped to the ground and took Mizuki somewhere. The 2 genin stood in silence for a bit before Menma turned and picked up the forbidden scroll and looked at Shio. Come on, we should report this to the Hokage. Shio felt the bitter emotions when he spoke of the Hokage but didn't mention them. She was curious to why he seemed to hate her family so much. From what she could tell from his emotions, he seemed to be using the hatred he felt for them to hide his sadness. They walked together a bit in silence before jumping on the rooftops the rest of the way to the Hokage's office. Hokage's office, Menma's POV. When they arrived at the office, Menma put the forbidden scroll on the Hokage's desk and stepped back a bit. Minato opened the scroll to check the contents, and nodded a bit. Thank you Menma and Shio for retrieving this. I was in a meeting the council discussing team placements when he snuck into the office for the scroll. Shio scratched the back of her head a bit. Tusan, I didn't really do anything. It was Menma who apprehended Mizuki. She felt the surprise radiating from Menma. Did he think that she would take credit for something that she didn't do? Minato also seemed a bit surprised and turned to Menma. Then thank you Menma for apprehending Mizuki. The penalty for stealing the forbidden scroll is death, and a B-rank missing nin status if he had managed to escape the village. You will earn the bounty on his head when he is put to death. Menma nodded. Thank you Hokage-sama. Minato put the forbidden scroll in a hidden drawer in his desk and spoke. Thank you again you two for returning this. I will see you later Shio, and good night Menma-san. They both nodded at the dismissal and left the room. Konoha Streets, 8 p.m., Shio's POV. They walked out of the Hokage building and stood apart from each other awkwardly. She cleared her throat. Well, I hope to see you again, and find out why you seem to have so much buried pain against my family. Menma nodded and started to walk away. She frowned a bit at his back before turning around for home. Uzumaki Residence, Kushina's POV. Kushina was flipping through a picture album of her daughter. She was so proud that her little girl was a shinobi. However, as she flipped through the pages and eventually arrived at a 4-year-old Shio, she felt something snap inside her head. She gasped and dropped the book, running out of the house. The book lay where it fell, open, showing the picture of Naruto's smiling face for the world to see. Menma's mindscape. A fox with 2 tails sat on top of the pond in Naruto's mindscape as he watched the hourglass shatter and sighed. It was almost time to reveal himself to his unconing host. He hoped that he would understand his reasons for separating him from his family. He settled down on all fours and stewed in his guilt for causing another family to suffer because of the Uchiha. Hokage's office, Konoha, Kushina's POV. 1 month before Chunin exams, Kushina was running through the streets of Konoha, her mind a mess. The skies seemed to reflect her mood as the clouds were dark gray with thunder in the distance. How could she have forgotten her own son? However, she was not hysterical enough not to notice the feel of a genjutsu lifting. If the genjutsu had any relation to why she had forgotten her Sochi, then he or she would burn. She ran into the Hokage building and kicked open Minato's door. Minato looked up startled at his wife's sudden entry. Kushina? What is going? His words died off as he saw her teary face. Kushina looked at Minato teary-eyed. Our son Minato. We forgot about our son. Earlier I was looking through a photo album and I saw a picture of him. Minato felt something shatter in his mind and immediately memories of Naruto flooded into his head. He sorted through a few of them and felt sickened as he put a hand over his forehead. Why could I not remember my son? That felt like a genjutsu had been broken from my mind. Kushina brushed aside her tears. We need to find him Minato. Who knows where he could have gone? He could be living on the streets. Minato rubbed his forehead thinking over the situation logically. He was devastated by this revelation. As an orphan himself, he knew the pain of growing up without parents. But to have parents, and seemingly have been abandoned by them? Even unintentionally? He would feel hatred for his former parents, and wished to get revenge. He looked at Kushina. We can't just announce to the whole village that our son is missing. With the Chunin exams coming up, a scandal this huge of a Hokage abandoning their child could ruin the village in front of all the clients. Kushina looked angry. Then we do what? Do nothing while my Sochi is out there somewhere? Minato shook his head. I never said that. I will gather every NBU member and join in the village and tell them to search for Naruto discreetly. I will also send notes to the hospital to test the blood of all non-clan genin to see if any of them match our DNA. Kushina nodded, whipping tears from her eyes as she looked fiercely at Minato. I do not care if our son hates us for our neglect, even if it was under the force of a genjutsu. It is probably too late to be his mother, but I will be damned if I do not make sure that he is safe and offer our home to him again. Minato nodded with a pained expression on his face. She left the Hokage's tower with a determined expression on her face. She would search the records of the orphanages first before looking at the academy records to see if she could find anything on Naruto. Minato's office, Konoha, Minato's POV. As soon as Kushina left, he buried his face into his hands. How could this have happened? He thought back to all the times in his life he could have been affected by genjutsu to ignore his son. The only time he could think of someone having enough skill to cast a genjutsu on him is the masked man from that night. He pulled out the files of all the genin from last year. He discarded the sheets of the clan heirs and children with alibis. Soon he was down to one candidate that could be Naruto. The folder showed the black-haired and blue-eyed genin Menma. He discarded the difference in hair color and lack of pupil. Both could be results from dyeing one's hair and overtraining. His pupilless blue eyes also matched in color to his own. He opened the folder to the boy's history and discovered that he applied for orphan status at age 6 and said that he did not know his heritage. The boy applied for the academy at age 8 the next day and was rarely seen around the village until he entered the academy. He stood up. He needed to find Menma. Uzumaki Estate, Konoha, Shio's POV. Immediately after the wave mission, Shio and the rest of Team 7 had just returned from their C-turned-A rank in the Land of Waves. It was a long mission and she was anxious to get home. Kakashi-sensei had told them they would report their mission Tamero, and they had the rest of the day off. She entered the estate and entered the house calling, "I'm home." She looked around. That's strange. Kushina is usually at home by now. Did Ka-san go out? She entered the living room and saw a photo album laying open on the floor. She picked the book up and saw the picture of Naruto and felt a breaking sensation in her head, and memories of her older brother came rushing to her head. She gasped and dropped the book in shock. Where was her Oniai-san? She clasped her hands together as if in prayer and expanded her senses. She had been practicing senjutsu with the toads for over a month now, and was able to grasp the basics of it. She created a shadow clone and had it meditate with her. Soon a red pigment surrounded her eyes and they snapped open, revealing toad-like pupils. She stood up and left the clone meditating and went to where a faint presence of her brother's chakra could be felt. She entered one of their spare bedrooms they never really entered and saw a sparse room. There was a single bed, a desk stacked with books and notes, and a bookshelf. She went where she sensed the chakra and found a sealing tag on the desk. It was a beginner's seal that stored chakra like a battery for people who are learning Fuinjutsu. She memorized her brother's chakra signature, and sat down in a lotus position again, and expanded her senses. She had never been able to sense that far before, but she ignored that problem and kept expanding her sensing range until she was covering the entire village and the training grounds beyond. She opened her eyes and dashed out the window as she felt her brother's chakra signature at Training Ground 26. Training Ground 26, Konoha, Menma's POV. Training Ground 26 is a unique training ground in Konoha. Instead of a forested terrain, the training ground is one large lake that has several large cliffs surrounding it. There were plenty of small islands on the lake and several waterfalls cascading down the cliff surfaces. This is the perfect training ground for training for underwater fighting, water ninjutsu, or water walking. Currently Menma was practicing the final step of water mastery training, reversing the flow of a waterfall. He wanted to complete this exercise before the Chunin exams. He was about to continue his training when he felt a presence behind him. He was surprised when he saw Shio standing there looking at him with an unreadable expression. He tried to control the hate he felt for the girl, but as always it came bubbling up to the surface whenever she was near. He glared lightly. What do you want? I do not want you to interrupt my training. Shio frowned a bit and spoke Naruto Oniai-san. He froze when he heard his former sister speak that name. His eyes narrowed in hate as he stared at her. I do not know what you are talking about. I am not your brother. Shio did not flinch, but her hands balled into fists. I know your chakra signature. I do not know why I forgot you for so long, but I remember now. I know without a doubt that you are Naruto, my brother. Please come back home, and we can be a family again. Menma scowled a bit. Even if I was your brother, I am not now. Your pathetic parents never had time for the lesser sibling, so why should I even think of returning to that home? He felt his anger grow a bit more as the web marking under his eye seemed to expand a bit down his cheek. Shio seemed to be getting angry and shouted, I do not know why they would forget about you, but I know my parents. They would never leave any child of theirs behind. The Uzumaki family never abandoned their own. Naruto glowered at Shio and shouted back, you may believe in your parents, but I gave them many opportunities to notice me. I shouted at them, begged them, prayed for them to notice me, but they always shoved me away to focus on you. He felt his hatred grow as he felt the toxicity of his blood increase in response to his anger. Shio seemed to steel herself if he refused to come home. She unsealed her nodachi. The sword was as tall as she was and had a plain black grip with an ornate steel guard. She got into her stand with the blade pointed behind her in a crouched stance, and sprinted forward while shouting, "Then I will force you." Shio used her wind manipulation around her blade and twisted around in a graceful arc before swinging her sword, sending a strong slash of wind at Menma while shouting, "Majestic slash of the heavenly breeze." He scowled a bit before activating his chakra scalpel and cut through the wind slash, cutting the strike in two pieces that slammed into the cliff behind him, deeply scaring it. He knew close combat against Shio would be suicide. Her wind manipulation and sword skills were almost unrivaled in the village. His arrows would be useless against her wind, but he had one advantage over her. They were on water. He sped through some hand seals before shouting acid style, "Water spider bombs." Out of the water bubbled medium-sized spiders made out of water with a red dot in the center. They all dashed at Shio with medium speeds. Shio quickly spun around in a pirouette, causing a cyclone of wind and water to come up around her as the water spiders jumped at her, exploding violently as they came in contact with the wall of wind and water. Soon the water wall was cut in half as another blade of wind cut through it at him. He ran through 4 hand seals before calling out, "Water style, hardened water wall." The lake surged underneath them as a hardened wall of water blocked the wind blade. He channeled chakra through his hands again and went through 3 more hand seals, acid style, giant spider bomb no jutsu. From the large wall of water a huge spider with a glowing red core emerged and pounced on Shio and exploded on her. He stood there still on guard. He doubted that spider would have killed her. Soon out of the spray of water from the bomb he could hear a slightly whirling of wind and widened his eyes at the sight before him. Around Shio there were 4 large fan-like blades spinning around her, forming a shield. He inspected the blades a bit. So this is the famed chakra manipulation of the Namikaze Uzumaki family. Many people speculated what Minato could do with Kushina's ability to harden her chakra outside of her body. "I guess this is the result." Shio nodded. "Yes, this is my true sword style, Dance of the 5 Blades. Please surrender, Naruto. You will not be able to defeat me." He narrowed his eyes. He knew he had no chance against her in melee combat, normally. He formed his chakra scalpels around his hands, but this time used pure acid release chakra instead of medical chakra, and acid began to drip off his hands as they turned black. He spread out a chakra web around his body to increase his sensory, and also began to use senjutsu. His eyes gained the same spider web insignia that Arachne had, and the whites of his eyes turned black. He glared at Shio with his new eyes and spoke, "I will not surrender to you. I dedicated my life to defeat you, and I will prove myself to be stronger than you." With those words he went through several hand seals with his poison palms and shouted, "Acid release, Dokukuri no Jutsu." Soon most of the entire battlefield was filled with a purple mist. Shio stood inside the mist, her blades of chakra circling around her, forming a ball of pure air to prevent the poison from affecting her. Soon out of the mist Menma appeared, with his chakra scalpels about to cut her. Before he could reach her, however, his shoulder was stabbed by one of the floating blades of chakra. Menma widened his eye before smirking as he dissolved into acid. Shio scowled. Those clones were incredibly dangerous. If she killed one of them close to her body, they would cover her in acid. She went through some hand seals before inhaling some air, wind style, great breakthrough. And a huge gust of air was unleashed from her mouth, and the poison mist was blown away. Once the mist dissipated, she was surrounded by 10 Narutos. She glanced around trying to tell which one was real. She scowled a bit. One wrong move would have her covered in acid. She spun around and unleashed a circular slash around her that bisected all of the clones, and raised a wall of wind around her to prevent the resulting explosions of acid from reaching her. She stood tense for a few seconds before she felt glowing hands clamp around her ankles. She screamed as she felt her tendons were cut, and Menma rose out of the water behind her, chakra scalpels glowing around his hands. He sneered at her end of the line. He raised his hands in a cross fashion, presumably to decapitate her when she went through some hand seals and bit her thumb, summoning no jutsu. He jumped away just in time for a huge red toad to appear in a puff of smoke. Shio panted a bit from the summoning cost of Gamabunta and felt the Kyuubi's chakra healing her cut tendons and stood up. Gamabunta looked annoyed as he stared up at Shio. "Why did you call me up here, Gaki?" Shio looked at the huge frog underneath her and said, "I am fighting my lost brother. We need to knock him out and return him home so Dad and Mom can explain what is happening." Gamabunta looked increasingly annoyed. "And don't you think summoning me is a bit overkill?" He would have continued, but he heard a shout of summoning no jutsu interrupted him, and in a large burst of smoke a spider almost as large as Gamabunta appeared. Menma was standing on the head of the beast and spoke calmly, "Aragog, let us fight together against this toad." He felt the spider under him shift a bit, and it spoke in a deep voice, "Yes, summoner, this toad will feed our clan for a long time." Shio gaped at the sight of the spider. How did he brother get his hands on the spider summoning contract? Gamabunta under her shifted a bit as he gripped his giant tanto. "I had heard rumors of a new spider summoner, but I didn't believe them. However, I've always enjoyed fried spider legs." Soon the two titans were battling, reshaping the training ground as their attacks broke the cliff sides around them. Their summoners offering assistance with elemental attacks and alerting their summoned to dangers. Aragog seemed to rely on trapping Gamabunta in webs while the toad kept slicing through the webs and dodging the pincer attacks. After a few minutes of intense combat between the two animals, they were both on their last legs. Gamabunta looked up at Shio and spoke, "Ha ha ha, I am only good for around one more attack, Gaki. Let's make it count." Shio looked down at Gamabunta and nodded. Gamabunta's mouth swelled with oil and he spat it out in torrents at Aragog while Shio used the fireball jutsu to light the oil on fire, making a huge gout of flames at the spider. Aragog quickly formed a large web in front of him, while Menma went through hand signs and combined the web with his water chakra to create a huge wall of water that blocked the large sea of flames. As the steam cleared from the amount of flames hitting the cold water, both Menma and Shio were panting as they gazed at each other from opposite sides of two cliff faces. Shio lifted her head and back inside her room at the estate her shadow clone poofed into smoke. Nature chakra surged into Shio and she went into sage mode. As she entered sage mode, she remembered a warning from Pa about sage mode. Flashback. Shio and Pa Toad were sitting across from one another, Shio in sage mode as Pa observed. After a few minutes of sage mode, she began to feel herself lose control of the energy before she felt a harsh smack of a stick on her head. Pa looked proud of Shio. Well, Shio-chan, it looks like you are able to stay in sage mode for around 5 minutes before you begin to lose control of the energy. If you are forced to use senjutsu before you finish your training, make sure to only stay in the mode for 5 minutes only. End flashback. Menma scowled as he felt the nature chakra enter Shio. He barely had any chakra left after blocking Gamabunta's flame toad bullet. He was thinking of his next action when he remembered something that Arachne told him. Flashback. Arachne was standing in front of Menma as he practiced acid release. Naruto, come here. Naruto looked over curiously and walked closer to Arachne. She smiled at him with her usual sleepy expression and spoke. I wanted to speak to you about learning partial spider transformation. This form usually takes around 1.5 years to master. However, there is another way to use it. Naruto looked interested. How can I use the transformation without training for it, sensei? Arachne spoke seriously. If you summon me in battle, we could merge and I could force the transformation for a short period of time, around 5 minutes max in battle. Naruto looked thoughtful. I will remember that, sensei, thank you. End flashback. Menma went through some hand seals summoning jutsu. Arachne. Soon in a puff of smoke Arachne appeared. She smiled at him and nodded, already knowing what they wanted. She reached down and kissed him on the lips, merged with him. Soon power exploded off of Naruto as the spiderweb pattern in his eyes seemed to glow and expand across his eyes, and 4 pincer-like claws exploded from his back, and he felt fangs growing from his mouth. He also felt his muscles grow denser as he finished merging. The form is a male version of Elise from LOL. Naruto and Shio stared at each other for a bit before dashing at each other and slammed their fists against one another, and a shockwave blew the water away around them as they engaged in fierce taijutsu battle. Shio had the advantage of her frog kata and increased physical ability, while Naruto had 4 extra appendages to fight with and his own increased strength. They jumped around the battlefield, both sides never yielding as they continued to fight fiercely against one another. As they fought, they started to feel the other's reason for fighting. Naruto felt Shio's regret and determination to remove him of his hatred. Shio felt Naruto's anger and sadness from being abandoned, but also his determination to prove himself stronger than her. Soon after 5 minutes they both were facing each other, panting heavily, the extra features of senjutsu gone as they stared at each other. Shio panted as she spoke. I only have enough chakra for 1 more jutsu, and I'm sure it is the same for you. Let's end this. She lifted her hand. A green Rasengan formed in it, spiraling fiercely as it started to rain and thunder around them. She jumped forward and yelled Rasengan. Naruto stretched both arms out, one gripping the other as a ball of incredibly toxic venom formed a sphere in his hands that had 6 legs and a dark red core, Arachne Soul. He jumped to meet Shio, shouting Queen Venom Bomb. The attacks collided in a large blast of energy, the toxic bomb meeting the maelstrom of the Rasengan. The 2 attacks fought against each other for dominance. Soon, however, both techniques exploded, causing a massive implosion of the wind-saturated chakra meeting the highly toxic acid. When the explosion died down, both Naruto and Shio were knocked unconscious on some fallen rubble side by side. The rain continued to fall on their forms as they ended the titanic battle. Soon Minato jumped down near them, staring sadly at their 2 forms. He felt great sadness that they had to fight in such a titanic battle. They should be living happily together, not trying to kill each other. He felt tears roll down his cheeks as he felt like a failure. What was the point of being the strongest ninja alive today if he couldn't even protect his family? He looked up at the rain in pain before he made a shadow clone to carry Naruto and Shio to the hospital. Inside Naruto's mindscape, Naruto opened his eyes to find himself laying on a large pond surrounded by forest. Around the pond were large tori. He looked around and spotted a small fox with 2 tails sitting in front of him. The fox seemed to be looking at him with understanding and pity as it spoke. Let us talk. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto's mindscape. Area unknown, Naruto's POV. Naruto looked around the landscape before focusing back on the 2-tailed kitsune. Who are you? And where is this? The kitsune looked a bit amused before it spoke. I am the former 9-tailed fox, the great Kyubi no Kitsune, and we are in your mindscape. He felt his eyes widen. Why are you here when you should be sealed within my sister? The Kyubi chuckled. Yes, I should be sealed within your sister if I had not inserted a tiny portion of my chakra into you before I was sealed. As you grew, so did the yokai chakra inside of you, allowing it to hold my consciousness. Naruto glared suspiciously at the Kyubi. Why would you escape from Shio's seal just to seal yourself into me? Without a seal holding you back, you could escape from my body easily. The fox nodded. Yes, I could escape from your body at any time, however, I have no wish to do so. I gave up most of my chakra to move to your body, so I am much weaker than before. Your body gave me anonymity from my enemies as well as a safe haven to restore my former strength. Naruto nodded, understanding the logic and what happens when you recover your strength. Will you attack Konoha again? The Kyuubi shook his head. No, I have no interest in Konoha or its people. I was forced to attack Konoha by Madara Uchiha. He narrowed his eyes. Madara Uchiha died years ago in the battle against the first Hokage. The Kyuubi's eyes glowed angrily. That is a lie. Madara Uchiha is alive and forced me to attack Konoha. He also used his eternal Manjiki Sharingan eyes to force your parents to abandon you. Naruto's eyes widened and remembered what Enko once told him. Flashback. Enko looked at Mema seriously. No parents just spontaneously forgets and neglects their children. Even if they focus more on their sister, they would never have forgotten you. It is not in human nature. End flashback. He had ignored her advice then, too caught up in his desire to revenge to give it much thought. But it did make sense. However, he remembered from reading about the Shinto religion that kitsunes were master manipulators. He looked at the Kyuubi. How do I know you're not just twisting the truth for your own benefit? I know that kitsunes are masters of illusions and manipulation. How do I know that you weren't the one who cast the genjutsu on my parents? He almost missed it, but the Kyuubi's eyes flickered a bit with guilt before returning to his regular calm expression. That's it, isn't it? You were the one who cast the genjutsu on my parents when you injected me with your yokai. Afterwards you would tell me it was Madara Uchiha to spark my rage towards him. The Kyuubi sighed deeply. You are smarter than I gave you credit for, Nigen. Yes, I used an illusion to force your parents to ignore your existence. In a flash, Naruto had a chakra scalpel out and tried to cut the Kyuubi, but 9 balls of an ethereal flame stopped him. The Kyuubi had not even flinched. Do not tempt me, Nigen. Despite only having a fraction of my former power, I am more than enough to deal with you easily. Naruto scowled at the reason for his abandonment and hatred. Then why would you do it? Why would you force my parents to abandon me? For your own sick amusement? Answer me. The Kyuubi was silent for a few seconds before sighing heavily. If nothing else, the boy in front of him served the truth very well, Nigen. But know this. To understand my reasons for manipulating your life, we must go to the very beginning. The world around them shifted until Naruto saw 2 giants, one male and one female, fighting each other. The male had an aged face with long white hair and wore a simple monk's robes with prayer beads adorning it. The woman was beautiful with dark black hair and wore a beautiful white kimono. Their fight was on the level of gods, reshaping the earth, destroying continents, and obliterating anything caught in the crossfire. The Kyuubi appeared next to him and explained, in the very first stages of our world, Izanagi fought his wife, Izanami. The argument was whether or not to share their powers with the humans of the world. Izanagi wished to share his power with the humans and spread peace, while Izanami wished to rule over all humans with an iron fist and keep them weak and helpless. The battle shaped the world to how it is today. At the very end of the battle, Izanagi reigned victorious over his former wife. The scene depicted the man stab a sword through the woman's heart. As she fell to the ground, she glared up at her husband and issued a prophecy. One day, my husband, I will return to this world in one form or the other. You have only delayed my plans. Izanagi looked at his wife sadly before speaking. You shall never walk amongst the land of the living, my beloved. I banish you to Yami for the rest of eternity. You shall be the seal that protects this world from the realms beyond. Izanagi lifted a monk's staff and a black void engulfed Izanami. Kyuubi continued his explanation. However, unknown to Izanagi at the time, is that Izanami had one last trump card. The seed of the Shinju tree. The Shinju is a sentient tree that grows in the deepest regions of Yami. Anyone who eats the fruit of a Shinju will be terribly cursed, but gain tremendous power. Izanami injected a small piece of her power into the seed and buried it before she was sealed away. The scene shifted again to show numerous wars and bloodshed until a great tree emerged from the blood of the fallen warriors and grew to a huge height, a fruit that looked like a peach at the very top. The Kyuubi looked upon the scene sadly before continuing. Eventually the Shinju tree grew from the blood of fallen warriors, producing its tainted fruit. It stayed there for many years before a princess, tired of the war and bloodshed, ate the fruit and gained its power to end the wars in the world. The scene showed a black-haired girl climbing to the top of the Shinju before gorging herself on the fruit. After it was eaten, she fell to the ground in pain. Her hair and eyes turned white. She grew a third eye and horns, and the rabbit goddess Kaguya was born. With the power of the Shinju, she ruled the world fairly for a time. However, eventually the energies of Izanami began to twist Kaguya. Soon Kaguya became a tyrant and demon, enforcing her rule on the world with a heavy fist. With Izanami whispering in her ear, she began to use the Shinju to drain the life force of her subjects, increasing her own power. Izanagi, finally stepping in to stop Kaguya, bestowed upon her sons 2 gifts. To the older brother he gave the Rinnegan. To the younger brother he gave the Byakugan and the power to manipulate his body. When Kaguya learned of this, she merged with the Shinju to create a terrible beast known as the Jubi. The scene showed a monstrous beast with 10 tails battling 2 men. The battle continued for many days until the older brother Hagoromo sealed the Jubi's chakra inside himself, while his brother sealed the Jubi's body and in the moon, and casted it out to space. After the battle, both brothers were considered mortal gods. Hagoromo became known as the Sage of the Six Paths while his brother was hidden in obscurity. Eventually both brothers found wives and started families. These children eventually started the Uchiha, Senju, Hyuga, and Kagaya clans. Nearly 100 years later, on his deathbed, Hagoromo gathered 9 animal spirits he had befriended and gifted each of them a piece of the Jubi's chakra, creating the 9 Bija. I received the largest portion of the chakra. With his last breaths, he told us to never let the Shinju be revived or it would drain all life on the planet, allowing Kagaya to escape from her prison. However, he also made his younger son, Azura, his heir. This caused the feud between the Senju and Uchiha to fester for centuries. Eventually, after years of fighting, the heir of the Uchiha and Senju clans, Madara and Hiroshima, made a truce to create a ninja village. Years later, Madara found a tablet left behind by Hagoromo that spoke of the Jubi and its power. Corrupted by this knowledge, he began to plan to become the Jinchuriki of the Jubi like his ancestor. This led him to fake his death in his battle between Hiroshima and himself. In the shadows, he began to make plans to gather the 9 Biju. I had been sealed in Mito Uzumaki during the battle, and that gave him the idea of Jinchuriki. Gathering the 9 Biju by himself would be suicide, but kidnapping their sealed containers would be child's play. He manipulated the budding villages at the time to seal the Biju inside of humans, and use them as weapons of war. While the nations battled each other, he started to form his own organization, the Akatsuki. Now he hopes to revive the Jubi to become its Jinchuriki, becoming a mortal god like Hagoromo so long ago. What he does not know, however, is that the Jubi contains Kagaya and a bit of Izanami's essence, which would recreate the Shinju and absorb him, and all life in the elemental nations, weakening the seal on Izanami enough so she can escape, dooming all life on the planet. Naruto was wide-eyed at this information. He had just learned the origin of the ninja world. He glared at the Kyubi again. Who are you? A normal animal spirit would not know of all of this. The Kyubi chuckled, and a spirit outline of a white fox with 9 tails surrounded the Kyubi. You are correct, young mortal. I was not just a fox spirit but the god of foxes, Inari Okami. I befriended Hagoromo, and he sealed the largest piece of the Jubi into me for safekeeping. Naruto felt a bit confused. Are you saying a god was able to be subjugated by Madara to do as he wished? Inari winced, an unforeseen complication. The Jubi chakra contained within me allowed him to control me. I assume Hagoromo knew this but thought that the Sharingan could be used to stop us if we went on a rampage. Instead, it was used to enslave the Biju. It was for this reason I gave up my chakra to enter you. I am now free from the Jubi's chakra and restored to my previous position as the fox god, Inari Okami. The god bowed its head in shame. However, I was very weak. Any opponent that killed you would have taken me with you. So I had to give you the one gift that would have protected you, anonymity. As the son of Minato Namikaze, you would have been exposed to assassination attempts and much more enemies than a nameless orphan. This gave me enough time to gather enough strength to protect myself. Naruto understood the reasons why Inari would do what he did. That does not mean that he had to like it. So you're telling me that you made my life hell just so I could be some pawn in the god's game of life? Inari seemed to look at him in pity. Yes, from the moment you were born you were chosen to be one of the 3 prophecy children to save this world from the resurrection of Izanami. The mindscape seemed to shift and revert back to the pond, and a door appeared behind Naruto. Inari stood in the middle of the lake and spoke. You may hate me, Naruto, but I did what is necessary. If Izanami no Okami is revived, the world is doomed. Naruto looked back at the fox before turning around and walked through the door. Konoha Hospital, Minato's POV. Minato sighed as he gazed at the unconscious figure of his estranged son. He had run a blood test on Menma and found out that he is Naruto Uzumaki. However, what worried him is the other DNA found in his blood. The doctors reported it seems as if someone or something took a chunk out of Naruto's DNA and replaced it. The medic Nin who did the blood test theorized that the extra DNA is the reason for his changed appearance. Shio had woken up several hours after the battle and received a severe tongue lashing and grounding for being so reckless. When she had described the battle, they were amazed at their former son's skills. Minato assumed that Naruto was the new spider summoner that the Toads had been hearing rumors about. When he had heard that Shio had used rudimentary senjutsu against Naruto, he almost flipped. Senjutsu is an incredibly dangerous skill. If one is not old enough to contain the energies, they could turn to stone. However, he was surprised when he heard that Naruto merged with some summoned woman and entered a form of sage mode himself. He assumed it was similar to when Ma or Pa would merge with Jiraiya and gather sage chakra as he fought. Still, Shio was feeling the stress of her sage mode by being sore in every single one of her muscles. The price of going into sage mode too early is that the body cannot handle the strain, causing ripped muscles and other injuries. She was lucky she did not go over the limit, or she could have been crippled. He perked up as he saw Naruto stirring and opening his eyes. Naruto's POV. Naruto opened his eyes to see the white room of the hospital. He looked around and saw his former father sitting there. He was surprised to feel none of the hatred he formerly felt for the man. He guessed all of his hatred was not directed at Madara, Inari, and the rest of the gods. Deep down he knew Minato was not at fault. Who could resist the genjutsu of a god? Especially the god of foxes who specialize in illusions? He struggled to sit up. He was still feeling the after effects of using sage mode without training. By fusing with Arachne, she forces the process of transformation, which is very taxing on the body. He looked at Minato again and waited for the man to speak. Minato seemed to gather his thoughts together before he spoke. I grew up an orphan. My parents died during the Second Shinobi War, and I was put in an orphanage. It was not a bad childhood, but living without parents is a very lonely existence. When I married Kushina, I swore I would give my children the best childhood that I missed out on. Then you were born and we were so happy. I had just become Hokage and thought life could not get better. He seemed to grow weary and sighed heavily before he continued. Then the Kyuubi attack happened as your sister was born. Everything was such a mess. Kushina fighting for her life in the hospital, my daughter now a Jinchuriki for the strongest of the Bijou, and the third Hokage dead. He seemed to contemplate how to continue before he spoke again. Recently, Kushina and I felt as if a genjutsu was lifted. We cannot be sure who placed the illusion, other that it must have been incredibly powerful for us to notice. Unknown to Minato, but his words confirmed what Inari had said in his mindscape. Naruto looked out the window as he considered Minato's words. Ever since I was 5 and I was locked out of the estate, I swore revenge against your family. Minato winced at his former son's words but let him continue. I trained every day to prove that I was better than my sister. I knew she was going to get training from at least 4 Kage level ninja. So I practiced what she would not expect, medical ninjutsu, poisons, and other subjects. But now I've recently learned that my parents were under a genjutsu the entire time and that it was not entirely their fault. He paused, unsure how to continue before speaking again. I do not have any more hatred towards your family, Minato-san. Minato looked resigned as he figured that Naruto was not done. He was correct. He continued, but I do not think that I can ever be a true part of your family. All those years of hating your existence cannot be erased so easily. Minato sighed resignedly. I thought as much. However, know that you have the full support of our family if you need it. You can also come back to the estate anytime you wish if you want to interact with the family again. However, I would expect a visit from Kushina soon. She was nearly broken about learning that we had abandoned you, even unintentionally. He nodded. He had expected that. Minato stood up and was about to leave the room before turning back. I am proud of the man you are today, Naruto. He left the room. As the door closed, Naruto closed his eyes a bit and thought of the situation. He felt so confused. Should he hate Izanami for causing all of this? Madara for continuing her work? Or Inari for serving the greater good and separating him from his family? He looked around the room and saw a small spider on the window and smiled a bit. Arachne? In a poof of smoke, Arachne was in the room sitting on the chair that Minato vacated, a concerned look on her face. He explained the situation and what he had learned from Inari as she sat there and listened quietly. When he had finished, she reached out and hugged him as she stroked his hair. It is all right to be confused, Naruto. However, all you can do is look to the future and decide your own destiny. Even if the gods had planned your life does not mean you have to follow your path to their wishes. You can be whatever you wish to. What the gods never understood is that humanity's greatest gift is to not be bound by the strings of fate. You can adapt, grow, and gain experience to meet this threat head on. I have faith in the summoner of the Spider Clan that you can break the web binding you to the gods' plan and find your own path. She kissed him on the forehead and sat with him looking out the window, thinking of the situation and how to proceed. On top of Konoha Monument, 3 days after being released from the hospital, Naruto's POV. Naruto stood on top of the third Hokage's head and looked out towards the village. It was raining lightly, so he had his hood up. His entire life had changed drastically over the past few days. The fight with his sister, the revelation of Inari, and the visit from his parents while in the hospital. He closed his eyes as he remembered the conversation he had with his mother. Flashback. Minato had left an hour ago before he felt another presence through his chakra webs. He sighed a bit before the door opened and revealed his former mother, Kushina Uzumaki. She did not look well. Her hair was uncombed, and her eyes were red and puffy. Before he could say anything, she rushed at him and hugged him while crying. He didn't know what to do. I don't know how to deal with this, he thought. Kushina managed to speak through her tears. Sochi, I am so sorry. We never meant to abandon you. He awkwardly pat her on the back as she continued to apologize for his abandonment. Eventually she managed to pull herself together a bit to speak clearly. When I realized that you were gone, I felt so horrible. Both Minato and I know how it is to grow up without parents, and to unknowingly bestow the same fate to our son. She seemed to lose a bit of her composure and started to cry again. Naruto's gaze softened a bit as he observed his mother. This was further proof that they did not intentionally abandon him. No one could fake that kind of sadness. He sighed a bit and spoke. When I learned that you abandoned me due to a genjutsu, I did not know what to think. After Minato explained his childhood, I doubted either of you would ever abandon me purposely. He looked down and touched his web markings. If you had not forgotten me, I would have never have become as skilled in the subjects that I am today. I would never have met the Spider Clan, or would I have met Enko. He looked at the hopeful face of Kushina. I used to hate you too. It was my purpose for growing strong. I swore when I was locked out of the house to become stronger than all of you. But now my hatred for you has disappeared. However, I doubt I can ever think of you or Minato as my parents. Kushina started crying silently again but nodded in understanding. Naruto lifted his hand and smiled a bit. But that does not mean we can't be friends. Kushina looked a bit shocked but laughed a bit and shook Naruto's hand sure. And flashback. He was still in thought when he heard footsteps behind him, and he opened his eyes to see his teammate Lee. Lee smiled a bit. I thought you would be here. Naruto returned to looking out at Konoha. I like to come here to think. Lee walked up next to him. You seem to be coming up here a lot. He snorted a bit, and smirked. That just means I have a lot to think about. Lee grinned. I know how to clear some of your questions. He looked at Lee curiously as he followed him to a training ground. Lee spun around in the Goken stance. In the midst of battle you will be able to relight your flames of youth. Naruto looked confused a bit before he laughed. Are you sure you want to fight me dead last? Lee grinned wider as he charged forward at blistering speeds. I am sure I can provide a worthy challenge, Mr. Rookie of the Year. He grinned wider and reinforced his body with the numerous toxins in his blood and rushed forward to meet Lee's punch. 1 hour later, both Lee and Naruto are laying in the practice field exhausted when they both looked up to see Yakumo and Anko's smiling faces. They all started to laugh and joke around while Naruto was inwardly thinking, I can't see you guys as family because I already have a perfect one right here. Konoha Academy, day of the Chunin exams, 5 hours before exam, Naruto's POV. Naruto, Lee and Yakumo are walking through the hallways of the academy making their way to the 3rd floor for the first test of the Chunin exams. They had arrived early to spy on the competition and find a good unnoticeable position. Over the past few days they saw many foreign genin teams from across the 5 great villages and nobles arrive in Konoha for the exams. It was a miracle that no incidents were reported besides a small altercation with the Suna and Konoha team. They all noticed a small genjutsu on the 2nd floor, but Naruto quickly whispered, don't point it out, the less competition the better. Team 9 soon arrived at the testing room and saw there were not many teams in the room this early. There was only teams from Kumo, Sand, Kiri, and IWA. The Kumo team had a blonde with generous assets alongside a red-haired tan-skinned girl and a tan boy with white hair sucking on a lollipop. The Suna team consisted of a makeup-wearing boy in a onesie, a blonde girl with a large fan on her back, and a red-haired teal-eyed boy with a large gourd on his back. The Kiri team had a boy wearing sound dampeners with a large fish-shaped two-handled sword on his back wrapped in bandages, a flamboyant-looking boy in a large blue coat, and a tan boy with a trident strapped to his back. The IWA team was the same team they had seen on their first C-rank mission. Naruto assumed that IWA held them back to participate in this exam to demonstrate their strength. None of the teams spoke to each other as more and more teams trickled in. Naruto recognized all of this year's rookie genin teams. Nothing interesting happened until Shio's team entered. Shio had been teamed up with Sasuke Uchiha and Kiba Inazaka. He kept looking around the room before he heard his name. I would like to know the information on Mido Gecko, Gaara of the Desert, and Menma. He looked at the group again and saw Team 7 standing before someone he recognized. He walked over before Kabuto could say anything. Hey Kabuto, never thought I would see you outside of the hospital. Naruto had met Kabuto while working part-time at the hospital. They often discussed different medical practices and theories. Shio looked up surprised at seeing her brother. Oh. Hey Nar, I mean Menma, how do you know Kabuto? Kabuto pushed up his glasses a bit. I know Menma-kun from working at the hospital. We usually work shifts together. Anyway, the information. He pulled out a card. Mido Gecko, daughter of 2 of the premier swordsmen and swordswomen of Konoha, Hate Gecko and Yagwa Yuzumi. She was almost the Kunoichi of the year last year but lost due to her lower marks in Genjutsu and throwing skills. She has been on 5 C ranks and 48 D ranks. It says here that her Kenjutsu skills are off the charts, as expected growing up with 2 masters of the art. Her teammates are Niji Hyuga and Tenten. Naruto kept an eye on the crowd as Kabuto listed the information and saw that the teams from Kumo and Kiri were interested in the Kenjutsu information. As expected, since those 2 villages were renowned for their Kenjutsu users, Kabuto pulled out the second card. Gaara of the Desert. Not much information on him seeing as he is from a foreign village, but I have here that he has come back from every mission without a scratch, even on a B-rank mission. Everyone's eyes widened at that information. The white-haired medic pulled out a third card. Menma, one of the only orphans besides Minato Namikaze to become Rookie of the Year. Specializes in poisons and medical ninjutsu. He has been on 1 A-rank mission, which is very impressive, and 10 C ranks and 67 D ranks. His teammates are Yakumo Kurama and Rock Lee. Kabuto kept monologuing information, but Menma had lost interest and was observing the crowd. Soon after a small incident with some sound genin in a poof of smoke, several Chunin and Marino Ibiki appeared out of a shunshin. He quieted the room with his mere presence and barked out orders. Alright all you little brats, I am the examiner of the first section of the Chunin exams. The first part of the exam is a written test. Everyone starts out with 10 points. If anyone is caught cheating they will lose half their points. Soon after everyone was settled, Naruto found himself between Kuratsuchi and the boy from Kumo. 15 minutes into the test and Naruto could only answer 3 questions, each requiring about Jonin-level poison expertise or doctor-level medical knowledge. He discreetly glanced around the room at all of the Chunin watchers. Why would they go to such great lengths to try and detect cheating? Ibiki could probably tell if anyone was trying to cheat him by himself blindfolded. He glanced towards the competitors nearest him and widened his eyes minutely when he saw Shirori Nara a few places away from him. He knew for a fact that she had graduated from the Chunin exams last year. So why is she here? He thought back to Ibiki's words. Anyone caught cheating will lose half their points. Why not just remove the person who cheated immediately? That is what they did back in the academy. He paused. What if they want us to cheat? He discreetly looked around at some people and saw a few genin discreetly cheat. Good for genin. But someone like Ibiki could easily spot it. He assumed that their cheating strategies were good enough for Chunin, so the proctors did not point it out. He smirked a bit. Closing his eyes, he spread his chakra web around him and latched onto the tenketsu points of Shiori's hand and began to copy her hand movement on the questions. He was sure that at least one of the guards around him could sense his chakra being used, but he doubted they would call him out on it since it was not obvious. He glanced at Lee near the front sitting next to Hinata. He was sure that Lee was too honorable to cheat on the test, so he decided to give him a helping hand. Acting as if he was thinking, he bit his thumb and went through some hand seals disguised as cracking his knuckles, and in a smokeless summon summoned 2 small spiders. One went to Yakumo while the other went to Lee. The spider landed on the desk and spun a small web detailing the answer to some of the shorter questions. Once 3 were filled for Lee, he dismissed the spiders. That was enough points to pass the test. Soon after the dramatic 10th question, the proctor of the next exam, their sensei Enko, led them to the forest of death. Enko began to scare the poor genins with her antics while she explained the test. Enko held up 2 scrolls. Alright, you maggots. The purpose of this test is to survive for 5 days in the forest behind me. While surviving the forest, your goal is to gather a heaven and an earth scroll before proceeding to the tower in the middle of the forest. However, before we begin the test, I would like all of you to sign these waivers, in case you die. There was some grumblings, but everyone signed the waiver and was given a scroll. When Menma signed the waiver and got a heaven scroll for the team, he smirked a bit as an idea came to him. He raised the scroll over his head and shouted, "HY! Our team has a heaven scroll." Nearly everyone around him looked at him as if he was an idiot, but the proctors and judges of the test looked at him speculatively. What the genin around him did not realize is that he had protected his team from half the competition. No team would want to waste energy and a potential defeat on a team they knew had the scroll they did not need. With that stunt, Team 9 had become one of the best protected teams in the competition, while simultaneously luring only teams they needed to themselves. As they lined up at an entrance to the forest, he smirked a bit as he felt the small chakra of one of his spiders attached to the 2 genin teams whose gates were closest to theirs. As soon as the horn blared, he motioned for their team to follow the chakra signature that his spider was emitting and soon crouched on a tree above a rain village team. They observed the team a bit and smirked as one as the leader took out an earth scroll. Without having to be told, Yakumo did some hand seals and trapped the team in a genjutsu. Naruto took out 2 syringes full of knockout venom and jumped down, landing on 2 of the genins and stabbing them in a major artery, effectively taking them out of the competition, while Lee appeared behind the last member and chopped him in the back of the neck, knocking him out as well. Yakumo smirked as they took the earth scroll. That was easy. Naruto looked around suspiciously. Too easy. I say that we start heading to the central tower before teams get desperate enough to surround it looking for people with both scrolls. After 3 hours of running, dodging wild animals, and avoiding teams with his chakra web sensing, they arrived at a small clearing. Naruto looked around. We should rest here for now. We want to be at full strength if we encounter another team. Lee nodded. Yes, it would be best if we wait for our flames of youth to replenish before continuing on to the tower. Yakumo nodded, already understanding youth speak to understand his meaning. We should lay some traps while we rest. Even with your web, we don't know if a team has the ability to counter or negate it. Menma nodded and his eyes glinted as he remembered one of the traps he wished to test. I have the perfect thing. Both Lee and Yakumo looked curiously as Naruto took out a black scroll and unsealed several mushrooms. Yakumo looked hesitantly at the shrooms. And what do these mushrooms do? Naruto chuckled evilly. If anyone steps on one of these, it will explode, sending a cloud of paralytic poison into the air, forcing the person who stepped on it to inhale it. No one will be able to sneak up on us with these around us. Kakuku, unknown to Team 9. But in a different dimension, every person classified as a jungler flinched simultaneously, while a small yordle chuckled heavily as he waited for more people to fall to his shrooms of death. 3 hours later, 9 p.m. Team 9 had entered the tower and opened their scrolls, which turned out to be summoning scrolls for a Chunin to explain the scrolls to them, and explained that they had to stay in the tower for the next 3 days. Time inside the tower moved slowly for the team as there wasn't much to do. They could not train in case they were spied on by an enemy team. After the 5 days were up, the teams that had passed were Kuratsuchi's team, the Kumo team with the lollipop-sucking boy, the Kiri team with the boy with sound dampeners, the Suna team with the red-haired boy, Team 8, Team 11, Kabuto's team, and Team 12. Team 7 had arrived with only a few hours to go for the competition. He was slightly surprised that Shio's team was the last to arrive. However, when he saw them enter, Sasuke and Mida looked pretty roughed up and Shio seemed tired. He guessed they had fought a strong team and only barely won. Soon the proctors called all the teams to the arena in the tower, and everyone prepared for the next event. Tower Arena, Naruto's POV. All of the teams were lined up in front of the Hokage and a group of Jonin. Minato stepped forward and explained the rules of the competition. I am glad to see so much potential in one room. However, we have too many competitors to make it to the final round. In order to resolve this, we are doing a preliminary round. Minato then proceeded to give a speech about how the Chunin exams were a replacement for war. A sickly-looking man stepped forward and spoke. I will take it over. Call from here, Hokage-sama. My name is Hade Gecko and I will be the proctor for the preliminary round. The rules are simple. Each battle will be a duel against a random opponent. The first person to surrender or be unable to fight will be out of the competition. He pressed a button on a remote, and a screen emerged from the wall. The first two opponents will be. The screen flashed with two names, Sasuke Uchiha vs Yoro Ikado. The fight was not that impressive to Naruto. He was expecting more from the Uchiha heir. Although it appeared as if he was injured from the forest, so his injuries could be inhibiting his performance. Although the move at the end was impressive, it appeared as if Sasuke made a swordless copy of the three crescent slash that the Gecko family was known to use. The next match made many of the Konoha and IWA members present widen their eyes. Shino Aburame vs Kamizuro Suzumabachi. The feud between the Aburame and Suzumabachi clans was legendary. It was almost to the level of the Uchiha Senju feud. Ever since the Aburame killed most of the Suzumabachi clan members in the first war, they have hated each other. Soon Shino and Kamizuro stood across from each other. Soon many bugs were swarming around both genin. The battle was intense as either side wanted to lose. Beetles against bees clashed in the air as both genin directed them. However, similarly to the last war, Shino's beetles were swarming each bee, taking them down due to sheer numbers over the larger bugs. Eventually Shino stood victorious over Kamizuro, the corpses of many dead bees around them. Misumi Tsurugi vs Kankuro. The battle was quick and brutal. Misumi demonstrated his family's skill of turning his arms to rubber, and was prepared to break Kankuro's neck when it was revealed that Kankuro was a puppet that broke many of Misumi's bones in a twisted hug. Sakura Haruno vs Ino Yamanaka. This battle was pathetic to Naruto. Despite Sakura's good usage of Genjutsu, probably taught by her sensei Kurenai, and Ino's use of her family's jutsu, they were barely genin level with their taijutsu and ninjutsu. Temari vs Shio Uzumaki Namikaze. Naruto raised his eyebrow at the matchup as the two girls walked to the arena. It was obvious that Temari was a wind user with her giant fan. But he also knew that Shio was one of the best wind users in Konoha besides Asuma Saratobi. The match started like he suspected. Temari opened her fan and unleashed a great burst of wind at Shio while she unsealed her Nodachi and cut the wall of wind. It seemed both opponents were testing each other's wind affinity, as they repeatedly blasted each other with wind. Naruto noticed that Temari seemed to specialize in the force of wind, while Shio specializes in the cutting aspect of wind. Soon Shio did one of her best moves. She used a wind cut to force Temari to jump into the air, which is what the Konoha genin was aiming for. Her sword glows green and she jumped into the air at great speeds and slashed at Temari repeatedly with the back of her sword. Shio landed gracefully, and sheathed her sword while muttering majestic slash of the rising vortex. Temari fell to the ground unconscious with many long bruises all over her body. All of the Konoha genin cheered for their fellow genin and waited for the next match. Shikamaru Nara vs Kintsuchi. The match was more a battle of brains than brawn as Shikamaru outsmarted the sound genjutsu using genin with his shadow mimic jutsu. Shikamaru proceeded to slam Kin's head against the wall of the arena, knocking her unconscious rather easily. Kiba Inazaka vs Samui. Naruto wanted to face Spam as the match progressed. Kiba seemed more distracted by Samui's than the actual match. While Samui displayed brilliant sword play, she really did not need it with how Kiba was distracted. Eventually she countered Kiba's Fang over Fang with her storm release. Naruto assumed the storm release is a mix of water and air to create lightning clouds in the arena, which bombarded Kiba after he mistakenly grabbed Samui's chest. Then came the next match, Niji Hyuga vs Menma. Both genin looked at each other, Niji hatefully and Menma emotionlessly. Niji had hated him ever since he had stolen his spot for Rookie of the Year. Anytime they met up, Niji would say he was doomed for failure due to being a clanless orphan. Soon they stood before each other and took their stances. Niji in the gentle fist style and Menma with his chakra scalpels. Once the match started, they both ran at each other with high speeds and began a taijutsu battle. Neither put force behind their strikes and were extremely technical in their strikes. Up in the stands, Sakura, who had recovered from her match with Ino when he turned to his teacher Kakashi-sensei, "Why are they not trying to attack each other forcefully?" Kakashi looked up from his book and spoke. Either of their styles of combat require forceful taijutsu. Niji is using his family's gentle fist style, which focuses on striking the internal organs and tenketsu points of the body by injecting chakra into the opponent's body. On the other hand, Menma is using an uncommon medic fighting style that revolves around the medical ninjutsu chakra scalpels. Menma can use those scalpels to cut open the internal organs of the body with just a light touch. Shio shivered as she remembered two arms out of the lake clutching her ankles. Back in the arena, Niji and Naruto quickly separates. Naruto glances down at his arm and scared when he noticed several finger-sized bruises on his tenketsu spots. Niji is clutching his arm as he had cut the tendons on it. Naruto went through some hand seals before thinking acidic bubbles, breathing out copious amount of bubbles towards Niji. Many people in the audience snickered at the perceived weak attack until one popped near the wall, and the concrete started to dissolve. Soon all of the bubbles began to streak towards Niji. Niji inwardly frowned. "I haven't mastered this, but I have no choice." He started spinning until a chakra dome surrounded him, preventing any of the acid bubbles from hitting him. When he stopped spinning, he quickly had to duck as Naruto swung his arm at where his neck would have been moments before and twisted in mid-duck and struck 4 tenketsu points on Naruto's chest. He frowned a bit as the Naruto started to melt in a purple puddle and jumped away as Naruto tried to jab him from behind. Unknown to Niji, however, is that medical chakra was surging into his locked tenketsu on his previously closed-off arm. As Niji charged forward, Naruto quickly dodged the palm thrust and then quickly jabbed with his previously sealed arm, hitting Niji near the lungs with the chakra scalpel. Blood burst from Niji's mouth as he fell backwards. As soon as Menma was declared the winner, he began to heal Niji's wounds. He looked up at the board and saw the next match and worried a bit. Rock Lee vs. Gaara. Naruto ended his healing hands on Niji as doctors came forward to collect him and contemplated the matchup as he walked back to the second floor. From Kabuto's information, Gaara is either incredibly skilled or incredibly lucky to get out of all those missions without a scratch. Naruto knew Lee was good, leagues better than him in taijutsu. But if this guy had a move that could negate Lee's taijutsu, he worried. Lee's POV. Lee stood before the red-haired genin and got into his Goken stance. Yash. Let us have a youthful battle. Some genin looked confused at what Lee was saying while Yakumo sighed. Gaara looked at Lee emotionlessly while the cork on his gourd popped out at great speed at the Konoha genin. Lee caught the cork and smirked a bit. Let's not be so hasty. Hate looked between the two genin before raising his arm. Hajime. In a great burst of speed, Lee disappeared and reappeared behind Gaara with a drop kick. However, before the heel could hit Gaara's head, sand blocked the leg and Lee had to jump away before the sand swarmed him. In the stands, sand? Questioned Naruto to himself. The medic wondered if that was a mutation of the Sabaka magnet release. As Naruto watched the battle of Lee constantly using high-speed movement to dodge and try and hit Gaara, he noticed that Gaara made no move himself to control the sand. Is it automatic? Impossible. Even the third Kazekage was known to have to use great chakra control and focus to use his iron sand. He continued to watch curiously as Gaara seemed to do the impossible and control his sand in an automatic defense. Naruto was shook from his contemplations when Enko yelled from beside him, "Oi Gaki! Take them off!" Arena. Lee separated from Gaara and glanced at his sensei. But sensei, you told me not to take them off unless I am fighting an enemy shinobi. Enko looked down at him. What the hell do you think you're doing? Pound his ass, dumbass. Some of the people who were not used to Enko's antics sweat dropped at the language he used. He nodded and quickly jumped to a safe distance away from Gaara and unclipped his leg and arm bracers and held them to both sides, wanting to show off for the judges a bit. Kankuro looked at the leg bracers and commented, what will that do for him if he takes those off? She would have continued, but Lee dropped the weights with an earth-shattering boom and severely dented the floor. Kakashi deadpanned at the scene and looked at Enko in a commiserating way. Was that much weight really needed in his training, Enko? Enko grinned savagely. It was Guy's original idea. I had my other Gaki draw up some chakra weight seals and apply them to his arm and leg bracers. He has been adding weight to them for over a year. Lee grinned menacingly at Gaara, who seemed a bit flummoxed at the weight, and disappeared in an instant. The automatic sand shield barely got there in time as Lee's leg hit, breaking through the defense easily and kicked Gaara away. Kankuro looked shocked that someone had actually managed to hit Gaara. Gaara got up shakily as he looked at his cheek, which was heavily cracked and flaking as the sand shield around his body mended. Gaara glanced back up only to see a foot that was too fast to be stopped by his sand and went hurling backwards again, only to be stopped by the other leg of Lee and sent him straight at the statue at the back of the room. Naruto looked upon the scene with a bit of pride. Guy had originally only wanted Lee to wear leg weights, but Enko insisted that he wear arm weights as well. This allowed Lee to increase his speed to mid-jonin level. Gaara walked out of the dust that had kicked up from the kick and looked heavily cracked. Gaara raised both his arms and sand started to shoot up from the ground and his gourd and rushed at Lee. Lee started to do some serious acrobatics as he frantically dodged the sea of sand rushing at him and kept trying to get to Gaara. Lee took out his nunchucks and used them as a shield and a weapon against the sand as he spun them around to beat the sand away as he charged towards Gaara. However, there was just too much sand in the arena for Lee to get through. Frustrated, he retreated to a sand-free corner and crossed his arms in concentration. Kakashi widened his eyes at that stance and looked to Enko incredulous as said Jonin smirked widely. Lee uncrossed his arms and power exploded around him. First gate. Gate of opening. Open. Soon Lee was hurtling towards Gaara and smashing through walls of sand before kicking Gaara in the chin and jumped up behind Lee and did a spinning flying suplex while shouting primary lotus. When the smoke cleared from the move, it showed a broken sand shell which vaguely looked like Gaara. Lee panted a bit from the backlash of using the first gate, but was able to barely dodge a wave of sand that came behind him as Gaara emerged from a pile of sand looking a little haggard. Lee, knowing he had no choice, crossed his arm over his face and concentrated. Kakashi revealed his Sharingan eye, wide-eyed as he viewed Lee. Enko looked at him seriously. Don't even try to judge me, Kakashi. I allowed Guy to teach him the hidden lotus for one reason, that kid can take it. If anyone is worthy to learn that move, it's this kid. Lee uncrossed his arms as even more chakra exploded from him as his skin turned red and his eyes lost their irises. Second gate, gate of healing, open. Third gate, gate of life, open. Fourth gate, gate of pain, open. With those gates open, it seemed as if there were multiple Lee kicking and punching Gaara around the arena, battering the Suna Genin. Eventually Gaara crashed into the ground, badly hurt as Lee could barely stand from using that technique. He looked at Gaara and saw him still conscious. lifting his hand to surely crush the weakened genin. Lee panicked for a second before remembering something before the Chunin exams. Flashback. Lee and Naruto were standing in a training field, resting after a sparring session. Naruto spoke up, Lee, if you face an opponent immune to taijutsu, you need something to fall back on. Lee looked confused, but I have my nunchucks Menma. Why would I need something else? Naruto looked at his teammate seriously. There are some opponents completely immune to physical damage. You need something that can damage people like that. Here. Naruto handed a pouch full of what appeared to be smoke bombs to Lee. Lee took one of the smoke bombs out and looked at it curiously, and Naruto explained each one of those is a powerful knockout poison. If you fight an opponent who can stop your taijutsu, use it. Lee nodded, looking thoughtful as he stared at the smoke bombs. End flashback. Lee quickly unsealed one of the smoke bombs and with all of his remaining strength threw the small ball at Gaara right before the sand hit him. Everything seemed to freeze as the ball exploded on Gaara, allowing the red-haired sand user to inhale the smoke. Right as Gaara went unconscious, Lee muttered, "I won." He could barely stand and he felt as if all his muscles were on fire, but he won against someone who was clearly a natural genius. However, before he could celebrate, his leg and arm were brutally crushed by sand. Everyone looked shocked as they saw Gaara shakily stand up, barely able to stand. Before Gaara could do any more damage to Lee, Minato flashed with his Hiraishin and stopped the second wave of sand before it hit down Genin. Baki shouted at Gaara, "Gaara! Stand down!" Gaara glared up at the Suna Jonin before all of the sand in the room converged on him, reforming his armor and gourd before slowly walking back up to the balcony. Naruto quickly jumped down to Lee with his healing palms already glowing a deep green. He did not understand how his knockout gas did not work. The stuff was designed to knock out large animals. Gaara should have been out for at least 3 days. He winced as he examined Lee. There were multiple fractures in his leg and arm. He stood back and let them take Lee away, feeling slightly helpless. He didn't have nearly enough medical experience to heal Lee. He never felt more useless than at that moment. There was a 30-minute break as the judges fixed the arena from the fight between Lee and Gaara. Lee had been taken to Konoha's hospital due to his injuries, so Naruto and Yakumo could not visit him. The next match appeared on the screen. Hinata Hyuga vs Yakumo Kurama. Naruto winced a bit. A Hyuga is one of Yakumo's worst opponents. With her Byakugan, Hinata could see through most of Yakumo's genjutsu, and was more than likely better at taijutsu than the genjutsu specialist. However, as he looked at Yakumo's face, he knew she was determined to win. It wasn't a secret that Kurenai Yuhi had basically raised Hinata, so Yakumo had always disliked Hinata, who she perceived as her replacement. Yakumo's POV. Both girls stood across from each other in the arena. Hinata was slightly nervous under the steely gaze of Yakumo. For a usually docile and happy girl, Yakumo looked like she was prepared to kill. Hate looked at the two girls and raised his arm. Hajime. Yakumo flashed through hand seals and Hinata soon saw her family, Kurenai, and her team berating her for being weak and useless. However, Hinata activated her Byakugan and saw through the illusion and ran towards Yakumo to engage her in taijutsu. However, before she reached Yakumo, the genjutsu user went through 4 hand seals and a wall of earth rose before the black-haired girl. Before Hinata could react, a fist of stone emerged from the wall and punched her away. Behind the wall, Yakumo was quickly painting a genjutsu painting. She didn't care for quality, she was going for speed as she painted a rough scene of the room they were in. As Hinata stood back up, she quickly rushed to the collapsing wall but gasped as everything was reversed. The room was upside down, and as she looked up she could see the roof but felt a severe case of vertigo as she tried to maintain her footing on the reverse floor. Yakumo chuckled a bit. "How do you like my real illusions? With this genjutsu everything is reversed, left is right, right is left, and up is down." She took out her tanto and ran at Hinata. Hinata took out a kunai to block the tanto but felt a cut appear on her opposite shoulder and gasped in pain. Yakumi grinned heavily also. Every cut appears in the opposite direction. In the stands, Kurenai winced as she saw Hinata attack in the completely wrong direction at Yakumo. She noticed Yakumo painting a picture and figured that Hinata is now in an almost unbreakable genjutsu. She wished she had not given up on Yakumo that day. However, she did not know that Minato could seal her Edo demon, and now Hinata is paying the price for her mistakes. Back in the arena, Hinata was breathing heavily as she had many small cuts along her body. Every time she tried to counter Yakumo, she was cut. In addition, any time the Hyuga heiress tried to attack Yakumo, her attacks went right through her. However, Hinata heard through the illusion her idol, Shio, encouraging her. She had always admired the Uzumaki heiress for her bravery and courage and focused a bit and waited for Yakumo to charge at her. As she got closer, she attempted something she had never managed to do before. She quickly spun in a circle while shouting Kaiten, surrounded her, sending Yakumo crashing away from her. Hinata gasped a bit. The Kaiten was a very draining jutsu. She would only be able to use it 3 more times before she passed out from chakra exhaustion. Soon the battle became who gets knocked out first as Yakumo tried unsuccessfully to get past the Kaiten and was flung back before both girls were breathing heavily. Eventually, however, Hinata fell over exhausted but proud in herself for being able to stand up for herself. Hate looked at the downed girl and spoke. "Winner Yakumo Kurama." Naruto POV. Naruto cheered for Yakumo and helped heal some of her injuries from the numerous Kaitens. "You shouldn't be so reckless. You could have injured yourself by charging in like that. Yakumo grunted but didn't respond as her medic teammate continued to heal her. He looked at the board and saw the next match, Choji Akimichi vs Kanata Dosu. The match was over fast as Choji used his partial expansion jutsu to try and crush Dosu. However, when Choji crashed into a wall, Dosu used his melody arm to knock the big boned boy out. The next match had him interested, Kuratsuchi vs Oma. The match was interesting to Naruto. Despite Oma's excellent kenjutsu skills, he was no match for Kuratsuchi's earth release and lava release. Eventually Omoi surrendered as he was surrounded by puddles of boiling lava. Jengata Hozuki vs Akatsuchi. The battle displayed a wide range of water and earth jutsu. Jengata seemed to constantly use water bullets to pierce the earth constructs that Akatsuchi created. The battle continued at a stalemate until Jengata summoned a medium-sized clam that spread a mist over the battlefield, created mirages that Jengata used in combination with his water jutsu to defeat Akatsuchi. Mito Gecko vs Chojuro. Mito's POV. Chojuro took out his double-handled fish-shaped sword and Mito drew her katana. Hate looked between the two genin before calling out Hajime. Chojuro sprang into action, unwrapping his sword revealing the Hiramikari eye and jumped into the air while yelling hammer form. The sword of the seven mist seemed to splash a bit before transforming into a giant hammer, crashing down on where Mito was seconds ago. Mito seemed calm and collected as she took a stance with her katana first dance. Sliver moon she dashed forward and right before she reached Chojuro she spun around in a graceful arc and struck at his side. Chojuro seeing where the strike was headed yelled out shield form. And the Hiramikari eye formed a shield around Chojuro. Mito's slash didn't even scratch the surface of the bubble, and she jumped back as Chojuro transformed his sword into a hammer again. She sighed a bit before channeled chakra into her sword, increasing the length by double with a blue glow. Up in the stands, Naruto raised an eyebrow and looked at his sensei. Isn't that the chakra practices that the samurai use? Enko while still watching the sword fight. Yup, what a lot of people do not know is that Haide's father was a samurai. He taught Hate everything he knew before they immigrated to Konoha. He must have taught the style to his daughter. In the arena, now holding her blue broadsword in one hand she rushed forward while whispering broken crescent, and jumped around Chojuro swinging her broadsword widely making many cuts along the shark-toothed boy's body. Chojuro twisted his sword around while yelling longsword form. And his sword turned into a huge sword when he swung it at Mito. Mito twisted around and swung her chakra broadsword with great strength while whispering great moon slash and the chakra from her blade sprang forward in a large blast that collided with the longsword form of the Hiramikari eye creating a blast of dust in the air. When the smoke cleared, Chojuro was on the ground with Mito standing above him, victorious. Everyone clapped for Mito as the last matchup appeared on the screen. Tenten vs Umi. Tenten stood across from Umi as Hate looked between them. Hajime. Tenten jumped into the air and started pelting Umi with all kinds of throwing weapons. However, before they reached Umi, he pulled out a scroll and went through some hand seals wave style. Great surf. Out of the scroll a great burst of water appeared and took the form of a wave and barreled towards the bun-headed genin. Tenten managed to jump over the wave, but the ground floor of the arena was completely flooded. Umi went through some more hand seals wave style. Turbulence. Soon the once calm flooded waters of the arena suddenly had small waves crashing around the ground floor. Tenten tried to keep her balance with water walking but was unable to and fell in the water. As she fell, a net covered her, and she was held at trident point. Hate, who had jumped to the balcony to escape getting wet, looked at the situation before calling winner, Umi. Soon all of the winners except Sasuke were lined up in front of the Hokage and Hate. The proctor had each person reach for a number before they all had won. Upon opening them they went like this: Sasuke Uchiha 3, Menma/Naruto 1, Shio Uzumaki 4, Kuratsuchi 2, Dosu Hinata 5, Umi 7, Kankuro 8, Yakumo Kurama 9, Jengata Hozuki 10, Gaara 6, Shino Bai. Hate reviewed the numbers before speaking. Alright, so the matches are as follows: Menma vs Kuratsuchi, Sasuke Uchiha vs Shio Uzumaki, Dosu Hinata vs Gaara, Umi vs Kankuro, and Yakumo Kurama against Jengata Kurama. Shino has a bye to the second round. The matches will not be held for a month to allow time for foreign dignitaries to arrive, so use this month to train and prepare for the third round. Minato, step forward. We have provided hotel rooms for each foreign genin team and welcome anyone to use our training fields to prepare for the final exam. Congratulations to all of you for making it to the final round. Konoha Hospital. One day after the preliminaries, Menma POV. Menma and the rest of Team 9 were visiting Lee in the hospital. They had just learned the horrible news that Lee may never be a ninja again. Naruto felt so useless. Despite all of the training in medical ninjutsu, he could not heal Lee. He knew it was pointless to beat himself up over not being able to heal something that doctors with years of experience over him couldn't. But he could not stop thinking about how Lee trained harder than anybody in Konoha to be strong, only to have it all wiped away by the madness of that genin. His fist clenched a bit. Gaara would pay. He walked down the hallways lost in thought. If Gaara stole Lee's future away from him, I will make him regret the day he ever gained that sand ability. However, he was broken out of his musings when he saw his sister talking to Kakashi. His sister seemed to be pouting a bit as the jounin looked sheepish. As Kakashi left, she saw him and a flash of guilt and surprise flashed through her face. Oh, Menma, I didn't see you there. She seemed to be trying to find the right words of what to say. Can we talk privately? How about up on the roof? Naruto considered the option and nodded. He had nothing else to do, so might as well. Hospital roof. As they arrived at the roof, Shio looked like she was contemplating what to say. I talked with my parents a few days ago, and I realized I was a bit of a brat back at training ground 26. I was under a lot of stress learning I had a big brother, ha ha ha. She cleared her throat a bit. I wanted to say I'm sorry for attacking you, Naruto. She smiled sheepishly while scratching the back of her head. Naruto looked at her a bit and sighed. I am not angry that we fought. It was a good chance to test my abilities. Shio perked up instantly. Yeah. Some of those moves were really cool. The spider was a bit creepy, but those chakra scalpels pack a punch. He looked at the still babbling blonde confusedly. Is she bipolar? Suddenly it seemed as if Shio realized something and stopped her babbling. That's right, Ka-san wanted me to invite you for the dinner party this Saturday to celebrate everyone making it to the finals. He wanted to refuse. He really did. But he made the mistake of looking into his sister's puppy dog-eyed hopeful look, and he felt his control waver. This is the person I've hated since childhood, he thought as he stared at the teary-eyed pleading expression of his former sister. He sighed deeply. Fine, I'll come. Shio cheered loudly before grabbing his hands. He could practically see the sparkles around her. Yes. It will be so much fun. Make sure you come at 6 p.m. and wear something nice. Mom did some investigating and found out you like sushi, so she is making that along with ramen, so I will see you then. Bye. She ran off quickly, jumping from building to building. Naruto stood there a bit. She investigated me? Konoha streets, Friday afternoon, Naruto's POV. Naruto was walking down Konoha's main street after talking to his sister. He was thinking of a training schedule for this month. He knew he needed an ace for the finals. His acid release was not really a secret. He was sure that most of the competition would try and find a counter for it. He did not show any of his hidden weapons during the tests, but he was sure that they would at least suspect he had something up his sleeve. He thought of his opponent Kuratsuchi, and what he knew of her. From a bit of researching, he found out she is Tsuchiki's granddaughter. She also was one of the few people in over a century to combine two elements without a bloodline. The lava release was definitely one of the most powerful offensive styles he had ever seen. If you don't get directly hit by the lava, you still have to be careful where you dodge so you don't step in the stuff. He definitely could not use his acid release against her. His toxic substances in the presence of lava? He would kill all of the spectators. He would have to rely on his tricks and medical skills to win the match. Enko had told him she was going to focus on Yakumo for the finals. He didn't blame her. Jengata was the descendant of the second Mizukage and probably knew quite a few of his tricks. He doubted Arachne could help him. The rest of her techniques would take years for him to learn. He entered his apartment and went straight to the hidden wall where he hides most of his weapons and searches through them. He equipped his arm crossbow, his back crossbow, a blowpipe, his satchel full of poison supplies, poison claws, and quite a few of his poison Samban needles. He exited the apartment to find a suitable training ground. Training Ground 18. Training Ground 18 is known for its obstacle courses. From bear traps to swinging logs, it has it all. Naruto was practicing his evasion as he knew it would be critical to have good reaction time against the lava user. The trick will be taking her out as soon as possible. The longer the match dragged on, the more lava will be on the ground. He jumped over a log and shot an arrow at the rope holding the other, as he flipped over a couple of blunted kunai, as he dropped on a wooden ledge and continued to traverse the obstacle course. It was not until around 5 p.m. did he leave the training ground and stored his weapons back into his apartment. Did he remember what Shio told him earlier, and wear something nice? He looked at his closet and saw nothing but training clothes and his casual clothes and scratched the back of his head. As an orphan, he never had to go to a nice party before, so he did not know what to wear. After making a meal of rice with roe on top and vegetables, he decided to go shopping for an outfit tomorrow. Next evening, Namake's estate, Naruto's POV. Naruto was staring up at the house that he had called home so many years ago. It felt weird returning for such a mundane reason. He had always imagined returning to this house to burn it down, not to attend a party. He was currently wearing a black suit with a wine-red button-up shirt underneath with no tie. He sighed and knocked on the door. Shio opened the door and beamed at him happily and dragged him into the house. You came. I am so excited for the party. We are hosting it in the back garden. Shio was dressed in a formal kimono but somehow made it look casual as she interacted with some of the guests. He saw Shikamaru with his parents talking to Choji and Ino. Shino was talking to Yakumo along with her parents. When he looked straight again, he saw Kushina smiling at him. Menma. I am happy you arrived. I saw your match and was very impressed. He noticed she kept her promise to call him Menma. He remembered the conversation he had with her after the preliminaries. Flashback. Naruto was walked away from the hospital and saw Kushina waving at him, and he sighed a bit as she walked over. She beamed at him. I am proud of you for winning, Naruto. I was hoping I could see where you live, so I could come over sometime. Naruto considered a bit before nodding, and they started walking to his apartment. His apartment would be considered Spartan if it wasn't for the plants. The apartment was more a greenhouse than living area. There were plants everywhere, on the windowsills, on the table, hanging from the ceiling, and in pots scattered throughout the area. The only furniture in the apartment was a bed, table with 2 chairs, and a couch in the living room facing a TV. They soon began a discussion about light topics, the weather, the Chunin exam, and other such topics. Naruto was surprised how easy it was to get used to Kushina's presence. She was a genuinely likable person. She seemed to have this aura that made people around her happy. He felt sad for never being able to experience that when he was younger. However, soon they started speaking of more serious topics as Kushina took a deep breath and asked the biggest question on her mind: have you considered retaking the Namikaze Uzumaki name? Naruto looked down at his hands and thought about the offer. It was tempting, very tempting. With 2 clan names he could get many benefits around the village and more recognition in the other nations. He could get better positions in Konoha easier, and even have better prospects of becoming Hokage if he wished to. However, he thought of Ainari's words: I gave you the only gift I could in my weakened state, anonymity. He hated the fox more than he ever hated his parents. But he was right that his actions probably saved him a life of always looking over his shoulder for his parents' enemies. He looked at Kushina and shook his head. I really want to have a family again, but I have worked so hard as Menma. In addition, if I joined the Uzumaki family again, I would attract too much attention. A son of Minato Namikaze who looks nothing like either of you suddenly being revealed? I just don't want to deal with that. Kushina looked sad but seemed to understand. Naruto continued, if you can you keep referring to me as Menma in public? I have grown attached to the name. Kushina nodded. I will. She stood up to leave and hugged Naruto. Even if you aren't a part of our family anymore, you will always be my son, and I will love you no matter how much you change. Naruto felt his eyes moisten a bit and hugged her back, smiling a full smile. And flashback. Everyone seemed to have a good time at the party. There were platters of sushi and large bowls of ramen for the guests, as well as drinks. Kiba had to be restrained from drinking alcohol by Shino, and everyone gaped at Hinata because of the amount of ramen she could eat. Naruto had fun talking to Mito and Shio. Unknown to everyone at the party, however, 2 figures were discussing plans on the top of a shadowy rooftop. In another dimension, Hate would have died, but he was allowed the day off to celebrate his daughter's victory in the preliminaries. 3 days later, Naruto was visiting the local hot springs. He had been training on evasion and water ninjutsu, and thought he deserved a relaxing soak in the hot springs. However, as he was relaxing, he heard an annoying giggling sound coming from the fence. He looked over and saw a large white-haired man that he recognized from the photo at the barber shop, Jiraiya of the Sannin. He had heard rumors of his perversity but did not know it was this bad. He sighed a bit before an evil idea came to him. Going through some hand seals, he used a trick he had learned from manipulating the hidden mist jutsu. Using the steam in the air, he manipulated them until the words "there's a pervert peeping on you" appeared over the fence. Behind the pervert, other side of the fence, Enko was talking with Kurenai before she spotted the mist message. She smirked a bit before looking at her fellow kunoichi, and they all nodded. Soon all of the civilians in the bath began to splash each other happily as they snuck around to the men's side of the bath. Soon screams of agony and pain were heard throughout the street as towel-clad kunoichi beat the Sannin within an inch of his life. Naruto watched the scene amused, hidden behind a small application of the hidden mist as he watched such a famous person be beaten by towel-clad ladies. As the kunoichi left, he got dressed and approached the man, snickering a bit. I hope you learned your lesson from this, but knowing your reputation, you probably haven't. The downed man seemed to miraculously heal, and in a poof of smoke summoned a large frog, and kabuki music seemed to play as he hopped on one leg. I am the man known throughout the world. The man feared by men and loved by women. I am the Gamma Sage Jiraiya. All he could do is deadpan at the ridiculous man before turning around to leave. Jiraiya face planted behind him and shouted, "Don't just leave." Naruto turned around annoyed. What do you want, perverted old man? 3 arrows seemed to pierce Jiraiya, each with the words perverted old man on them. Jiraiya sighed heavily as he looked at the genin and remembered his conversation yesterday with Minato. Flashback, Jiraiya's POV. You have a son? Shouted Jiraiya as he looked at his student in shock. Minato grimaced a bit while rubbing his forehead. Yes, it seemed that someone put a genjutsu on Kushina and I that would force us to gradually abandon him. Jiraiya still seemed to be in shock and said, can I meet him? If he really is your son, he would be my godson. Minato nodded. He goes by the name of Menma. He registered himself as an orphan and graduated as Rookie of the Year last year. Jiraiya looked thoughtful. I remember that. I got a notice saying for the first time since my student and orphan gained the title of Rookie of the Year. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, Minato? Minato smiled sadly. I just wished I could have helped him get there. Can you look after him during this month? Perhaps teach him some of your skills? Jiraiya brightened. Sure, I'll teach the Gaki some tricks. Perhaps he can sign the Toad contract. Minato winced. He can't sign the Toad contract. He signed the Spider contract. Jiraiya looked downtrodden. That's too bad. Not to mention there is no chance of him signing both due to the clan he signed. Minato looked confused. Why is that? Jiraiya looked out of the window solemnly. The spiders and the toads have been rivals for centuries. They are natural enemies in the wild, and that reflects on their clans. Toads are known for eating spiders, you know. Minato winced a bit but nodded in understanding. Please just look out for him. There are rumors of Sans discontent with us, and I want to make sure this exam goes smoothly with all of the other Kages arriving. End flashback, Naruto POV. Jiraiya leaned in a bit and whispered quietly, your father wanted me to check up on your training, see if you need help with anything. He would have helped you himself, but he is very busy with the Chunin exam preparations. Naruto nodded in understanding. I have been fine training on my own, but can I ask you a few questions about hypothetical situations? Jiraiya nodded and they began discussing strategies to defeat Kuratsuchi in the finals. After an hour of discussing the problem, Jiraiya stood up. Why don't we spar, kids, so I can see how good you are? Naruto nodded and they headed to Training Ground 9. Training Ground 9. Naruto and Jiraiya clashed for over 30 minutes before Naruto coated his hand in spikes of poison and quickly tried to punch Jiraiya while calling out acid spike punch. Jiraiya quickly spoke out Hari Jizo, and his hair grew into a shield around him and deflected the attack. Naruto called an end to the training spar as he saw that move. Jiraiya-san, what was that move? Jiraiya looked a bit confused. Of all the moves he had shown, his personal hair jutsu was the one he focused on. That was my personal brand of jutsu. I use my hair to attack and defend. No one ever expects the hair to be used as a weapon. Naruto pondered the uses of such a move. It could remove his weakness of his webs being intangible to the touch. If he could weave his hair into a web around the battlefield and direct it with chakra, he could mimic the spider's best moves. Can you teach me how to do that? Jiraiya looked a bit more confused. Are you sure? By the time you get it down, it will probably be time for the finals. Naruto nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. Yes, I am sure, Jiraiya-sensei. Jiraiya laughed. Sensei, eh? I like the sound of that. Naruto's apartment, day of the finals, Naruto POV. Naruto equipped his wrist crossbow and smirked a bit as his hair unwove from its web position around his apartment. It was time to show the world what he can do.